meeting. And for those who might be watching live or viewing this as a recording, we also thank you for your paying attention to the issues and concerns that will be presented before this group today. By way of getting started, I would like to thank everyone for being here today. We do have a message that Kristen Walker is on her way, given the weather conditions and the road conditions. I encouraged her to just be safe and get here when she can. So we're going to go ahead and proceed with our meeting, though, and so I will officially call this meeting to order, and would like to say welcome to those who are either very brand new to the leadership group or who were reelected at the last meeting, the meeting in August. Elections were held, and as a result of those elections, we have to my right, Catherine O'Brien was elected as chair-elect. Then we have members who were able to and agreed to serve another term. And so Cindy Griffith agreed to serve a new term, as well as Joyce Williams, who could not be here today, as well as Juan Garcia from TSTC Harlingen, who also could not be here today. We have Robin Garrett, who is serving a 2-year term. Terry Nix was elected as ex officio member. Thank you, Terry, for agreeing to serve. And then we have Dwayne Shaw, who agreed to serve a 2-year term. And then Megan Elkner, who also is serving her first time on the Wecm Leadership Committee. So welcome to you. In just a minute, I will ask for us to review and approve the August minutes, but I want to express appreciation to this group to allow me to serve as your chair for the next 2 years, and I will certainly do everything I can to follow in the footsteps of our immediate past chair, Raphael, for his leadership these past 2 years. And in fact, Raphael, as a way for this group to express their appreciation to you, we would like to present you with this plaque, which just says Raphael Brizista, Chair, Wecm Leadership Committee, 2012 to 2014.
Thank you, everyone. My life was made easy by the great group that I had to work with the entire 2 years, and obviously there are some people that mentor me along the way. Some of them are not here today. I really appreciate Joyce Williams for pushing me to step up and take the leadership, and obviously some of the older people in the group. I didn't want to say that, but obviously
we know who we are.
You know who you are, and you know that without your support and help and mentoring, you know, it would have been a tough job. There were a lot of changes during the 2-year tenure, and again, I really appreciated the membership for stepping up and getting to the next level. As you know, we stepped into the programs of study at the same time. We made some changes in the way we conducted the summer workshops, and most importantly, thanking Midland for all they did all those years. And then we went into San Jacinto College, and they took on the job, and it was just a great group of people. And I think San Jacinto College needs to be commended for what they did. It made all of our lives easier. And for me as the chair, it was a pleasure to be able to work with the people that took the job, Jeff and his team, and Dr. O'Brien, Catherine O'Brien. So thank you, and I really appreciate this. Obviously, this says a lot about the great work that's been done across the state of Texas. It wasn't about me or even the leadership team, but what's been done across this great state. Thank you again.
Well, again, Raphael, we appreciated your leadership, and I will look forward to having your support as the immediate past chair, continuing to support this group. So thank you, Raphael, for all that you have done and all that you will continue to do. Just by way of explanation for folks, the immediate past chair, the current chair, the chair-elect serve as the leadership committee officers as the executive committee, along with the project staff, for Jeff Parks with San Jacinto and Faye Murphy as the project director, and then Dwayne Hiller serving as the coordinating board representative to Wecm. So we serve as the executive committee to the leadership committee. And so it's that group that is responsible for representing you in an official capacity. So when we met last in August, the minutes of that meeting are attached here in your handout material that Faye Murphy has presented to you. Some of you may have had a chance to read these in advance. Some of you may not have. So what I'd like to do is ask that you take just a couple of minutes to read through them and to see if you find anything that's a glaring issue or an error, especially a typo of some type, especially in names and so on. And then what I will do is entertain a motion for approval in a second. And if it appears that there's some corrections that are needed, that motion might need to include the ability to have those corrections made as a part of your motion as well. So let me give you about 3 minutes to peruse the minutes, see if you find anything glaring. Then the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, just one comment on page 3. I know it's a minor edit, but the total grant funding needs to reflect 159,000. Just so we make sure that that decimal place gets
very good.
Placed. Okay. Also on page 5, El Centro College, just remove the E and insert an O there.
O, yep.
Yes.
Don?
Yes, sir.
One other, also on page 5, it has me listed as member position 3, and I don't know, I think this is listing me as member position 2. One of the two is, I don't know if the minutes are correct or if the nameplates are, I don't remember which.
Okay, that needs to be looked into. Yes. We'll check it for accuracy. Thank you for pointing that out. It is three.
Should be three.
It's correct.
Three.
Yes.
Three.
Yeah, it is correct then. It is three.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as they stand with the corrections.
Okay. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Clerk White. Okay. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay. Next agenda item is under organizational reports, and of course the first part of that is an update from the coordinating board. And so Dr. Tarmerlin, I will turn this part of the agenda over to you, sir.
Making sure the microphone's coming on.
Sir.
Well, first of all, thank everybody for being here today. Thanks for all the work that you do on Wecm, and I know it's a never-ending task, and some of you have spent a long time working on it, as discussed earlier. But I guess the first thing I want to talk about is the agency, the coordinating board, is either in the process of going through or has recently gone through. I guess perhaps it depends on the ink on all the forms related to the personnel actions, but a bit of a reorganization to try to focus on the issues that are perhaps more current and more relevant to higher ed as a whole. And what had been WAR, as we like to call it, Workforce, Academic Affairs, and Research, is now Academic Quality and Workforce. And my title is, or will be, I guess depending on exactly where we are in the process, is now Deputy Assistant Commissioner Workforce. And I share that with y'all because I think it shows the agency's emphasis on workforce and how important workforce is as part of the national conversation in the higher ed agenda as a whole. And so obviously we are just making those transitions. It was announced to the staff here at the agency on the 17th, I believe, Dwayne. That sounds right, or at least that's as I recall it. But and so we're just really getting all that implemented and beginning to transition, if you will. But with as we move forward into the legislative session and as we move forward in our work, I think you'll see a higher emphasis on workforce and that students actually leave education with marketable skills. They can get a job or perhaps an understanding of exactly how their education ties into the workforce. But we have a team at an advisory committee that's in the process of developing the higher ed strategic plan right now. Ultimately, it'll be adopted by the board sometime next year. But the goals they're focusing on right now, which I should emphasize are draft goals, really are tied to workforce. How does higher ed help Texas have the workforce it needs in the future? And so wanted to emphasize that a bit. Then probably relevant to this group and hopefully those that are watching via webcast is we're in the transition stage, phase, I guess is perhaps the best way to describe it, of getting ready to implement the changes associated with the 60 semester credit hour limits that were imposed as part of the 83rd legislature. On Friday, the October 31st, each institution was requested to submit a spreadsheet to us either affirming that they've changed their degrees to 60 semester credit hours or submit compelling academic reasons of why the degree needed to be more than 60 semester credit hours. We are in the process of sorting through and trying to get a feel for that, of how many institutions we actually have their spreadsheets from. If there are any institutions that haven't submitted, hopefully by the end of the week we'll be contacting them. Dwayne and I have kind of had busy schedules the first part of this week, and so we've kind of just touched base on it a couple of times. But I believe we have the majority of them in. I am actually making the changes associated with the AA and the AS degrees, and I've completed about 20 of those schools already. And Dwayne is doing the changes associated with the AAS degrees, and the AAS degrees generally involve changes to certificates as well. But we hope to have worked through that by the end of this month. That's our target date. As of right now, we have about 30 proposals for compelling academic reasons. That may not be the definitive number. The last time I asked Dwayne to give me a count, it was actually 27, but I'm saying 30. Just where, I mean, we have a fairly small team, all things considered, and for us to gather all of this and do anything definitive at this time is I don't want to talk in terms of absolutes, but hopefully by early next week, I'm going to start focusing on those compelling academic reasons and start aggregating them into like disciplines and that sort of stuff, and get a feel of where we are, what's the lay of the land. And then from there, we'll figure out what our next steps are, which, I mean, obviously that'll involve the assistant commissioner and others. But we have some strategies that we hope to guide us to that. But we've committed to the institutions by February 28th next year, 2015, we'll have returned and supplied answers and worked all this out with the institutions. So that's probably the biggest current agenda item, if you will. We're gearing up for session. We've talked about this, and y'all's group has talked about it extensively. We have a legislative priority around fields of study and programs of study, and that's getting a lot of interest at the Pink Granite Building. And so as session starts, we'll have a better feel for that, of where we're going. But for this group, programs of study, I think we know is a national priority, and it goes back to what I talked about, the reorg, and how workforce is such a emphasis in higher ed today of aligning the public school system, high school, to the CTE piece and the continuation. So collectively, programs of study and field of study tackle both of those. And there's probably a whole list of other things that I could talk about, but I will stop there, and I'll entertain any questions or specific subjects, and I'll probably defer to Dwayne to let him answer them.
Gary, if you would, and again, it might be Dwayne that might want to talk specifically about this, but there's been some repositioning of information on the coordinating board's website, specifically related to Wecm and workforce education. It might be helpful to this group, and then to those that might be listening now or who might view this later, to get just a sense of the intention or the purpose of the strategy behind some of this repositioning of information in the website?
Well, the work is in transition right now. It's in progress. It's not complete. But what we are planning on doing, what we're working on, is putting everything Wecm in one place. To where when you go to our webpage right now and click on WAR, but that will be changed soon from WAR to academic quality and workforce. And then into the public community colleges, there is Wecm search. That is just going to become Wecm, and everything Wecm will be under that link. And as an example, on either that page or the next page, without having it in front of me and remembering exactly, is the historical workshops of the courses that have been reviewed. What we have already done is, on that sheet right now, each workshop had about 4 Excel spreadsheets. And what we have done is we have taken each year and incorporated it into one spreadsheet with separate tabs or sheets down at the bottom. I should say workbook, I guess, to use Microsoft's jargon. One workbook per year with separate worksheets in it that contains the same information. And so then we will have one document that you can click a hyperlink that will take you to those years where you can search that archive information. And if you go to the Wecm search page now, you'll see the new hyperlinks that in essence have been cut in, if you will, and the topics associated with that. Everything Wecm has a topic. There is a leadership, I think, or didn't we use the word leadership? I don't remember. Dwayne is shaking his head affirmatively on that. So things associated with this committee will be there. And so we're really trying to get it succinct and down to one place. I hope to have that work done in the next month or so, but it's underway.
Somewhat related to that, Dr. Tarmelin, is all agencies in the state of Texas are now using a kind of a government email web system. Could you explain that a little bit as well?
Well, if you go to our main website, there's a icon, and it's e-update. And what that is it's kind of a listserv, but it's more sophisticated than a listserv. And there are threads in there, and you can subscribe to those threads of interest to you. And then when we communicate with the field, if you have subscribed to those, then you will be included in that distribution. Now, some of the threads are private. You can't join the President Chancellor thread. Well, you can, but you got to go get a job to get on that one, which I encourage you to do that if that's your goal. But some of them are out there publicly. You can just subscribe to those, and then we'll be pushing information to them. Some of them you have to be in a specific group to receive those threads. But obviously, it's about transparency and trying to provide communication to the field in a timely manner, but without filling up your inbox. So I don't know, myself, I always kind of try to figure out, should I push this to this group? When you send it to perhaps another group, did that group send it downstream? And so it's a challenge, but this will allow you to get the communication you want. And that's another thing that we've been transitioning to. I don't recall the live date. I want to say mid-October, fairly recently, perhaps early October. But again, it's another one of those things that's in transition, and trying to get a consistent, unified message, if you will.
Thank you. That's helpful, and I would encourage every person that's on this committee and anybody that listens to this broadcast, just about any page you go to at the Coordinating Board website, you'll now see that icon. So that you can just hit that icon with your mouse, and it'll bring up this list, if you will, of information by topic that you would like to subscribe to. So I would encourage all of you to personally make sure that you go in the next day or two and subscribe, especially to the workforce section information. Dr. Tarmelin, thank you for that information. Dwayne, is there anything from your perspective that you need this group to know what's going on? Okay, so he covered it all already. Very good. Let's see. I know that Kristen Walker from TACE is still on her way here. I'm not sure that Kay Young, probably given the weather conditions, she probably thought it wise maybe not to try to travel. We also are in the process of trying to have TACRO identify a member from the registrar's organization who will serve as their representative to the Wecm Leadership Group. So hopefully by the time we have our next meeting, we will know who that individual is. So in terms of organizational reports, the TACE Wecm Committee Member Orientation Process, Kirk, is there anything that you have?
I do, and I'm wondering if we don't want to just
defer it to the
protocol discussion.
Okay.
It's all kind of tied to updating the protocol and what we've decided to
Very
do
good.
with the whole process.
We'll treat it that way then. Thank you. Let's move on then on the agenda item, Wecm Leadership Project Activity Report, the Director's Report. Faye Murphy.
This fall has really been pretty busy, but not as busy as last year when I was trying to determine what my job really was. We have spent the last 2 months, working on the materials for the workshop this spring, which will be conducted in May, and it will be one workshop. It will cover the career clusters 4, 16, and 14, and all of 6, and 14. All of these are business-related clusters. So therefore, due to the fact that we have faculty members that possibly could be teaching in all 3 clusters, we're going to have our workshop all in 1 week. We will begin the week with developing programs of study. We will be working from proposed models, which are subject to being revised as the faculty join us. We think that we can do all of this in 1 week, and those faculty members then will be held over for the Wecm workshop, which will begin most likely on a Thursday morning, and they will review the courses and rewrite those that need to be rewritten. We believe that we can do this simply because last year we discovered that our courses are really in pretty good shape and that the faculty members were able to move through that process much faster. Some of us back in 1997 dreamed of the day when the courses would reach this point. They have reached this point. We do see that in the future that we will have fewer Wecm courses, because as programs of studies are developed and the colleges come closer together with common programs, many courses probably will not be needed. And I'm not saying that to upset anyone. We know that there's a lot of duplication in most of the courses in any given cluster. We have spent a significant amount of time on a new nomination process. We had to do that since we're linking programs of study with the Wecm process. And we have a process that will be a little bit different from last year. We talked about the weaknesses in our process last year. We moved to a system that would give us more information. In actuality, it really didn't give us more information. So this year we will have a nomination from the college administrators. They will nominate the faculty to participate, and the content area will be identified by rubrics. In other words, Steve, you would know that what rubrics any of your teachers are teaching, but you might not know which cluster that fits in, and you might not know the zip code. So we will work at that level with rubrics. And then once the nominations are received, then the faculty who are nominated will get a form, and they will be asked to identify the courses that they're teaching. And from that, we will try to select faculty members that can represent most of the courses in these 3 clusters. I'll be eager to see just what happens. But I can say one thing. We are building a wonderful database because of the automated nomination system. So right now I can tell you like this, who was nominated last year, who participated, and such and so on. When we add another level and another level, when we finish with all the clusters, then we'll have a pretty good database. Not a database that will live forever because people do retire. However, our challenge has been we don't really know who has participated necessarily in the Wecm courses, and we can't get to it real easy. We will be able to do that. I did something different this year. I decided that it was time for my office to be a little bit more transparent, okay? So I have used Dropbox, so that each of you all were invited to join Dropbox, and I post those documents that I think are relevant to your work so that you can see where am I, what is going on. You can look at the minutes from the previous meeting. There's no reason for you to have to keep all of this if we can put it in Dropbox and you can have access to it. It's working real well. Thank you, Joe, for helping me get that set up. I have also started working on 2016, okay? And 2016 is not going to be a one-week workshop. I truly believe we'll be back to 4 workshops. We'll be looking at career clusters 3, 11, 13, and 16. And we have a lot of courses, we have a lot of programs, and this is going to be a very complex task. However, this year we're going to be prepared, we will be preparing for the next step because we'll do another run, just like we did with real estate. We learned so much from our beta test. We'll continue to refine what we learned there as we move into the next phase. What data are we using to try to pull together the possible workshops, the teams that were needed? First of all, we're looking at the number of programs throughout the state. We're looking at the number of completers to see, are these programs really working? And we want to take this to the faculty members so that they can see. And frankly, I would doubt that most faculty members really have a clue as to how many completers that a given program has throughout the state. And it's amazing how it varies. So this is information that I think is really going to drive our process a great deal. And then, of course, the number of courses in each rubric. This is kind of fun. I've also decided that I need to be a bit more organized with my steering committee and my task group. And so each time they receive their document like this, it's going to be bound so that they can keep their materials together. So my goal this year has been to improve my performance by doing a better job of organizing materials and keeping the teams informed. Thank you.
Well, Faye, we thank you very much for all the time and effort and work that you put into this. Folks, as you may not be aware, the position that Faye is filling on behalf of San Jacinto College in this project was only funded at like a half-time position. But I don't know if y'all notice when you wake up in the morning or turn on your computer and you see this new Dropbox update, and there's like 23 files have now been updated. 15 files have been updated. That just shows you the time and the effort that Faye is putting in to support this project. So we thank you for your dedication and the true spirit of collegiality that you've given to this work. Thank you. Let's move on now to part of the responsibilities either of the project staff and or the leadership committee is to provide information to the various professional organizations. And so Jeff Parks represented the leadership committee this past month at the TCCIL conference. So Jeff, if you would give us an overview of what occurred.
Thank you, Don. I presented with Faye Murphy at the TCCIL conference. And we always look forward to doing the presentation, and the presentation went really well. And the reason I say that is because as we presented on programs of study, it hasn't always been well received. And as we've continued to move forward with both Wecm and programs of study, people have started to embrace and also understand more about the process and given us excellent feedback. And that's probably the biggest thing that has helped both of these is the feedback we've received from the field on just basic processes and how we can actually implement this and move forward, because it is an important driving factor in the United States right now, plus in the state of Texas. So when we did the presentation this time, it was just a pleasant surprise because people were really very receptive to it and just and gave little tidbits of information as opposed to the fire hose approach that we'd been receiving in the past of feedback. And so it was very nice. We had a full room, lots of questions that were asked and lots of feedback. But like I said, it was very positive feedback. We presented on the overall process of programs of study, the beta tests that we performed this summer on the real estate, lessons learned, and what we want to move forward in implementing and making changes to our process. Plus, we gave an overview of Wecm and some of the basic operation of the database and some of the updates. So as a whole, it was a lot of fun. It went really well, and it was very well received. Any questions for me on anything? That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you and Faye providing that information to the TCCIL conference. And then we have Steve Davis, who volunteered just recently, this past week, I believe, to represent the leadership committee to the registrar's organization, TACRO. So, Steve, if you would give us an overview of how that went.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I attended week before last at Waco, drove down early one morning, and would like to thank Faye and Jeff. First off, they shared their PowerPoint presentation with me that they had used at TCCIL. Faye and I went over it over the phone and did a little bit of editing and whatnot. And so, again, I presented late afternoon, and when you do late afternoon sessions, you always wonder if there are going to be very many people or not. We had about 40 to 45. Very well received as far as the programs of study, very well received as far as the Wecm maintenance issues and ideas. We spent about 30 to 45 minutes going over the PowerPoint, and then there was time for questions. I found that many of those individuals, the individuals that introduced me, had been a registrar for 41 years. He was very knowledgeable in regards to Wecm and the Wecm process and the Wecm website and being able to utilize it to meet his needs and whatnot. But then I realized that probably about 90% of the individuals that were at the presentation were newbies. They did not have a lot of information and a lot of knowledge about the Wecm process. They didn't know about GIPWE. They didn't know about the Wecm website. They didn't know how to find archived or archive pending courses and active courses. So during the question and answer session, they kept me over for 45 minutes past the end of my session.
Wow.
They were like sponges. I really think we've identified a need throughout the state that we have so many new people in our institutions, not only in the registrar's offices, but also in continuing education, also in workforce education. I know many years ago the THECB would go along and do week-long orientation sessions to the GIPWE manual and to Wecm. And again, that's when it was new. It was very expensive, but it was very effective. And then we have many people that are like me. When I came here 8 years ago, I came from New Mexico. I had no idea what Wecm was, had never heard of it, didn't know how to use it, was kind of thrown in and said, learn it. And I was given the GIPWE manual and said, read it from cover to cover. This is your Bible. That does make a difference. So, again, it was a very good presentation. It is quite obvious that organization and the individuals involved in that, especially in the community colleges, need some additional information and orientation and education in regards to Wecm and its processes.
Steve, again, thank you for being there and representing us. And my sense as well is that that is such an important group because the registrars have that responsibility to make sure that information is correctly put in students' records, on their transcripts, and so that person really needs to be knowledgeable at their institution of those things that directly impact their duties and responsibilities. So, again, what I said earlier, what I'm going to be sending out by tomorrow is this introduction to the Wecm PowerPoint presentation that has been put together by the coordinating board staff. And so, especially Steve, with your own personal experience coming from another state and just reciting what you just did about your own personal experience, and then what you've said now about the TACRO meeting, your feedback will be very important in reviewing that material and giving good feedback. I want to say welcome to Kristen Walker, and I know your name card says Navarro College, and certainly that's where you are employed, but you're representing TACE, the Continuing Ed Administrators Organization, and that is also a group that we make a presentation to, and in fact, way down towards the end of the agenda for today will be someone out of this group who will wind up volunteering to do a presentation in late spring at the TACE conference. Kristen, I know you're trying to catch your breath from your travels and your journey through the traffic here in Austin. We have already gone through where the organizations were on the agenda for presentations. So I don't know if you need a few more minutes to kind of get yourself situated before you talk about
I had plenty of
TACE.
time to think. So you think I'd have my own? You would think I would have my own agenda that I could go through, but there's
Okay, very
two
good.
things.
Great. Let's get then formally recognition of Kristen Walker representing TACE to give her organizational report.
The conference, April 21st, 22nd, 23rd, Omni South Park, proposals, breakout. Yeah, the opportunity to put together a proposal is out there. So we are diligently requesting some new things. We want to shake some things up, not do what we've always done. And that lended quite well into these audits that the co-board's doing. And I'm not for sure where Steve was coming from, but he was saying some of the things that we were talking about at our TACE board meeting, that we too have a lot of new people. Yes. And a lot has maybe been brought to the surface with the audits and what was being asked and what we really need to know and what we really should be doing. And because even amongst our board members, there were some variances. So,
do you have any, just out of curiosity, to give everybody a little bit more context, were there some specific questions in the audit which need more edification for the people around the state?
Definitely. And I've had to tread that lightly because Navarro just finished their audit.
Uh-huh.
However, CE wasn't part of it. So now I really don't have any specific questions from Navarro's perspective because they didn't audit CE.
Right.
However, the things that were being asked of me initially, right?
Right.
So this again is really just not TACE, but Navarro, but census rosters.
Yeah, census rosters, for example.
Are we supposed to do census rosters? When you talk to the board, some do, some don't. And even to the basics of where files are housed. You talked about the registrar. You mentioned the registrar. I think each institution has handled those things differently.
Right.
When even a question I had back to the co-board at some point was, what would you expect to see in a file? We file things this way. Another institution files things this way, by student, by course.
Right.
2 different places, in the registrar's office, in the CE office, on what campus, where program. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Actually, Kristen, I think you've really surfaced something here. A number of years ago, I can recall when I was a continuing ed dean for Mountain View College, in fact, in my early years with the Dallas district, there were a set of, I will say, guidance materials that the coordinating board provided of expectations of such things as what should be in a student's file for CE. It'd be like a outline of the course information and that kind of thing. And that was really put together again when the transition from TEA to the coordinating board for workforce and continuing education. Historically, folks, again, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time here, but prior to 1984, workforce and continuing education was a responsibility of TEA, not the coordinating board. The coordinating board was only responsible for the ACGM academic and transfer side of community colleges. So it was not until 1984 when the legislature mandated that all of higher education would fall under the responsibility of the coordinating board. And so the coordinating board actually had to create a new division to start up workforce continuing ed. And so with that responsibility, the coordinating board kind of started pulling together that kind of information so that colleges would know what was expected. So that's something that I think that we can talk with Dr. Tomerlin about and see if the agency itself would be a little bit more assisting to us in terms of knowing what their expectations are, or at least communicating with the professional organizations, TACE and TACTI, so that continuing ed especially has a sense of what kinds of responsibilities that each institution must demonstrate.
And that is our goal, is to write a letter requesting
Good.
that.
Very good.
And then to request that some of that information be brought to the conference, if possible, as well as, and I did speak with Dr. Tomerlin on all of this
Good.
at TCCIL, and so he advised that he would then send it to the auditing and
Right.
blah, blah, blah group. So,
Right.
so those dialogues have started.
Good.
And certainly dialogue with our board. And I was just hoping to be able to provide a little bit more information once Navarro had gone through the audit, but then that wasn't. But there were still lots of questions, and it was just interesting, the differences amongst the schools, who kind of just does what a little bit different, and where do we go to find those kinds of answers if we don't have a historian.
Right. Right.
Dr. Perry on campus, or Dina, or
Right.
some others. So anyway, that was kind of the main thing that I wanted to
Good.
bring
Wonderful.
forward. And I believe we now have everybody sealed for the Wecm TACE group. I think each one of those spots have been filled. Okay. I'll follow back up in an email.
Okay.
But our
All
last
right.
board meeting, I was like, y'all aren't leaving until.
Very good. Good, Kristen.
So we had we had a long meeting. No, not because of that, but really because of what was coming out
Sure.
with the audits and,
Sure.
and dialogue. Because that's what TACE should be, and I
Yes.
think that's what our institutions think TACE is giving.
Right.
And so we do a lot of. This is Wecm. Kirk's done a lot. Dwayne's done a lot. We've provided that, but not some of this stuff that we all started getting questions on
Right.
when this audit notification came out. And so when you're in that seat, you have a different sense of
Yeah.
urgency about where to find that information, who to
Right.
call, and without
Sure.
raising red flags.
Sure.
So the organization needs to be focused on that. And that's what our theme is. It's about a toolbox. We want to provide our members
Great.
the toolbox
Great.
to go and do their job. Well, certainly that entails the expectations
Right.
of the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. So-
Right. Thank you, Kristen, very much. And in fact, that really provides a good segue for our next agenda topic. I'm going to talk about the task group, especially for those who might be listening in, and Megan, for yourself in particular. The rest of the folks here have been a part of the leadership committee for a little while and may already have this understanding, but want to make sure that it's clear that when we first started as a leadership group, understanding that the courses that we review in the summertime need to have the review needs to occur in such a way that courses that have relationships to one another, especially on the credit side, in terms of those courses being attached to a program or programs that are related, that we needed to make sure that these workshops, the nominations process, took into account those relationships. And so starting in about 2010, this leadership group asked a subgroup to start working on that effort. And so it was called the Wecm Leadership Task Group. And that task group is comprised of 8 individuals from the leadership committee. Primarily, it's the executive committee people and a couple of others who have some good senior experience in knowing the processes and protocols for Wecm. And so what we have done is, since 2012, when we had our very first series of workshops that summer based on career clusters, bringing in faculty who taught courses that were related to programs of study. And so that occurred in 2012 and 13. And by the time we started looking at 2014 preparation for those workshops, we had this other state leadership project called the Programs of Study Project. And it became very evident to the task group, and we presented it to the leadership committee, and the leadership committee voted to approve this approach, that basically what we needed to do was to make sure that course reviews occurred based on how programs of study are put together. And so with the Programs of Study project, that work has been going on now for about 1.5 years, and that particular project ran, as you heard earlier from Jeff Parks, that project, and Faye Murphy, that project for Programs of Study did a beta test this past summer using real estate as the beta test, And that's reflected in the minutes that you've just approved from our August meeting. So I'm not going to go into detail on that. But just to set the context of now, the task group met yesterday from 10 until 5, and it was a full day's meeting, I guarantee you, because what we're trying to do is get ready for next summer's workshops. And as you heard from Faye Murphy, she gave you an overview from the director's point of view. And so what I've asked, and she agreed to, was Dina agreed to give an overview of the task group's work from yesterday. And I want to make sure, however, that y'all all understand that while a lot of what's being done is being done because of the relationship now between the programs of study and Wecm on the credit side, that we are still sensitive to the needs for continuing education in the Wecm. And so I don't want that to be lost, or a feeling all of a sudden that it's the credit side that's driving now the ship, and so CE is secondary. That's not true at all. And in fact, I will just say, as long as I am chair here, I will make sure that we steer this ship in a direction that is responsive to the needs of our institutions in this state, both on the credit side and the continuing education side. Because it's self-evident to me personally and to my organization that CE is not just as important as ever, but it's more important than ever. And so please understand, group, that when you hear so much of the time being spent talking about programs of study, that that is not taking away from the importance of continuing education. Okay.
Thank you, Don. That's an excellent point. If you have, those of you who are not on the task group, it goes like this. You walk in the room, they lock the door. You're given a list of things to get done. And if you want dinner, you get to work. The task group included Rafael Bracita. We did meet yesterday, as Don said. It was Rafael Bracita, Catherine O'Brien, Robin Garrett, Kirk White, Jeff Parks, Dwayne Hiller, Faye Murphy, and me. We were joined early in the day by Dr. Gary Tomerlin, and he came back and joined us again later in the day. And late in the day, Dr. Rex Peebles also joined us and observed the discussion and watched the way that the group was working. Our early discussions with Dr. Tomerlin did include kind of a continuation of what Don's introductory comments in terms of the alignment and the movement forward between the two projects, the Wecm project and the Program of Study project, and more significantly for the state, the alignment between the work to be done between the Wecm project and the Program of Study project. As you already know, we have one workshop coming up this next summer, and we'll be dealing with the clusters 4, which is business management and administration, 6, finance, and 14, marketing, sales, and services. And as you all already know, there's been a shift in the planned way to do the Program of Study business. We had originally envisioned the Program of Study project had originally envisioned a model whereby we would do Program of Study creation workshops one summer, and the work coming out of that would inform the Wecm workshops the next summer. And we did the real estate workshop this last summer, kind of beta testing with that model in mind. Since then, there's been a collapse of work, so that in the future we'll be creating state programs of study and doing Wecm course review at the same time. So the Program of Study process will sort of piggyback on the ongoing calendar and schedule that Wecm's already established that Don described. So we had several pieces, critical pieces of work we needed to get accomplished yesterday, because even though it feels like fall, it's really almost too late to do some of the summer planning for next summer, because we have to get, it backs up. There's so many things that back up behind it. We decided early on that, of course, our most urgent and important business would be to finalize the Wecm courses to be reviewed and how we'd structure teams there, but significantly how we would identify the programs of study to be developed this next summer and how we'd overlay that process with Wecm course review. So I've told you the clusters we're going to use. Within those clusters, we had to look at those and identify programs of study to be developed. Now, in a previous meeting, the task group had met and started to identify, and through phase work with data, we started to identify what we came to call a decision-making filter for where is it we create a state program of study. And so we spent some time working on that filter and then applied it to those clusters that we're going to be working with this next summer. And the filter that we use to look at to decide where do you create a state program of study is that we looked at the number of existing programs in the state within the cluster being reviewed. So, for example, we looked at the number of programs that exist in the state right now in the business management and administration cluster. Within those programs, we looked at the number of completers statewide, and that gives us a sense essentially of need for state programs of study. How many are already there and how healthy are they in terms of producing completers? And of course that feeds back and tells you how much of those completers needed. And then once we'd taken a look at that, we looked at based on data that Faye was able to access, the courses that are commonly used. In other words, you might have several programs of study in 4-digit zip codes, but then Faye would look within those at the courses that are used in those, and are they common with other programs of study? So that while the zip codes might be different, you might be looking at very similar or same programs of study, essentially. So we did that. We used that filter, and it worked very well, and we did some honing and identified ways to present the data in the future to make the process a little bit smoother. But using that framework, here's what next summer looks like. As Faye said, we'll have one large workshop in May. It'll be May 19th, 20th, and 21st. And Catherine, I just want to make a note right now. In the minutes on the nomination form, it says 19th, 20th, 21st, and 22nd. So we initially had thought we were going to have even a 5-day work week, but we were able to pull it on down. We're going to be creating state programs of study in business, secretarial careers, and accounting, with specializations within those as appropriate. There will be a couple of Model 2s this next summer, insurance and fashion, that don't fall within or under those programs of study. And then keep in mind that we've already done the real estate, which would fall within the clusters being reviewed. We did that last summer. What we didn't do last summer, of course, is take the recommendations from that work and review Wecm courses in light of those recommendations. So we'll be doing that this next summer. So having made that kind of structural decision, we moved on to immediately review and rewrite the process for nominating the instructional specialist. And what we needed to do, in addition, Faye's already mentioned that we made some decisions about putting rubrics in that nomination process to make it easier for nominators, but we also had to make it clear in that nomination process that many of the nominees would be participating in the creation of state programs of study. And so that has some different implications for those colleges that will be sending nominees. So we did a significant rewrite and some rework on the nomination letters and the first and second letters and so forth, and had turned it then back to Faye and Jeff to create the specific timeline. And that timeline on nominations is where everything starts backing up on us, because those folks have to know who's coming, how many how many rooms do they need and some things like that really early on. So, and then when you take into account that this all goes on when we have spring breaks that vary across the kind of muddy up the month of March, it really backs up on us. So we did that work. And then we moved on and reviewed the workshop agenda so that we know that we need to create 3 statewide programs of study with specializations, and that we need to then review the courses that fall within those clusters associated with those programs of study. We also need to review the real estate courses, and we have this one kind of big workshop plan. So how did we go about it? We created a workshop agenda that involved the first day an orientation for the facilitators early in the morning, and that would be a Tuesday morning. And so those of you who end up facilitating at that workshop will be kicking off early Tuesday with an orientation for how we're going to do business that week. Then day 1, business, industry, and instructional representatives and instructional representatives are going to be in the same room, and they're going to be looking at program level student learning outcomes together. And in that early part of the process, we envision our business colleagues to be in the front rows and talking to us about what program level student learning outcomes look like for these programs of study in these 3 major areas. And this is a little different from the beta test we did this summer. So we're going to have, because on the outside of that circle, we're going to go ahead and have our instructional specialists hearing directly from business what they have to comment. But we're going to put those business people up front and let them speak up first. And then we'll move forward from that, having identified those program level student learning outcomes, to moving the instructional specialists into the inner circle and picking up the dialogue about what the implications are then for specific courses in those programs of study. But we're going to keep both those groups together in the room through that process. Then late in the day on day 2, we'll let our business partners go and our instructional specialists will stay, and we'll get about the business of revising Wecm courses and making recommendations about Wecm courses using that information. And then, of course, we'll also be addressing the Wecm courses that weren't included at all in the program of study, which would include recommendations from the TASE committee and reviewing all the local needs and special topics and looking at frequency data and so forth in the same way. We'll continue that process on through day 3, ending early enough in the day, we hope, for folks to get on the plane and for all the workshop team to collapse or whatever it is we're going to do. I'm not sure I'll even be there, but whoever is there will probably collapse and have to be, hauled off to the airport or whatever. So that's the gist of the work we did. The specifics will be rolling out, as Faye said. She's rolling out the recommendations from the group in the new nomination letters and so forth. We have the notes from the agenda; those will be getting out to the committee, and we have a plan now to hone the coursework coming out of our first program of study workshop and create 3 additional state programs of study. So we're moving along, and we identified our next work, of course, will be to talk about what happens next after you start creating those programs of study and how do you continue to, what's the continuing impact on our Wecm course review. So, thank you.
Dina, thank you. That was an excellent summary. We also need to acknowledge the fact that Catherine O'Brien
Did an amazing
really does
job.
an incredible job of, as you can tell, the whole time she's been taking notes of this meeting, and she did that all day yesterday. And so her expertise in providing this kind of documentation of on the fly what we're agreeing to is so critical to capturing
It is.
this kind of detailed information. So, Catherine, we all owe you a great deal of gratitude.
Here,
Thank you.
here. And Catherine is truly, I couldn't endorse that more, and also would like to say that Catherine is an individual who can do that and participate.
Yes.
And that's just an amazing
Yeah,
ability.
it is. It is.
I will tell you the secret. I'm the oldest of 5 girls, and everybody all talked at once when I was growing up. So being in a room with 8 of us talking all at once yesterday, it's really very easy.
Dina, also, I just want to say thank you for the summary that you gave. I know maybe to the person who's listening to this, it doesn't sound like that was 7 hours worth of work, but I guarantee you it was every bit of 10 hours shoehorned into 7. And actually, that's part of what I want to just spend just a couple of minutes talking to this group about, and that is this is a lot of work and effort. It really is. And I know that when we present this kind of information to the full task group, we do want to make sure that you are understanding what it is that we're doing as a task group, because this is your group. So if you have questions or something's not clear, now is the time to ask and inquire, because we work for you, the whole group. We're not trying to be the deciders. We're just trying to be your worker bees. So if you have some questions, I'm opening the floor to make sure that y'all have a sense of where we're headed now in preparation for next summer's workshops. So if something's not clear or you're not certain, or you have some questions, or you have some recommendations of difference in approach, we need to hear it.
Well, Don, I have a question. Being a workshop facilitator, is there going to be some type of orientation for all the workshop facilitators, or the facilitators, and are there going to be any more facilitator and training sessions? Again, that's just an interest that I have
Right.
before May gets here.
Good question. Now, what is, you might have heard Dina say, basically what the plan is, but if, it's certainly subject to revision, but what the plan is right now is that on that first morning of May the 19th, a Tuesday morning, from 8 until 10 would be the facilitator orientation. And the orientation material, which we'll look to Joe in his expertise, is to have Joe work, of course, with Faye very closely, and the task group, to make sure that we build that orientation material in such a way that it is kind of like a hot seat situation, because you move immediately from 8 until 10, then we're bringing other people in. So we need to get a sense of whether that's going to meet the needs or not. Dina, do you have any
Yeah,
comment?
Don, just to comment, Steve, something I didn't say was that specifically part of the work we identified for the next task group meeting is the workshop tools. So we'll take that agenda that we kind of roughed in and detail it out, and then go through the thing where we picture ourselves in front of the room, having learned some things in summer, and say, what tools do we need? How do we need them up? Don's right. Joe Garcia was, of course, with us this last summer, and he does such a great job of taking process and turning it into tools. I think once we have those and can distribute them, it'll make a great deal of difference in terms of picturing it. But you're right. Then we'll need the specific training to go through that process.
Just want to mention, those of you, again, there was a lot of information that Dina provided. I'm sure, and I talked to Don about this will be in the Dropbox, the minutes, because it is a lot of information to remember from today. So go in there and take a look at it. The task group spends a lot of time, and thanks to Catherine, putting everything together. But please do that. Also, I want to remind you that as you move forward, you want to make changes across the state, you're going to have some colleges that are going to resist some of these changes. But, at the end of the day, these programs of studies are going to create some good pathways for our students, regardless where they're at. And we need to try to communicate that to the people across the state. A lot of them see this as, well, I'm doing a great thing here at this community college, and why should I change? But at the end of the day, if we don't sell it as a committee and as a group that's representing higher ed, it's not going to go anywhere. The programs of study are going to be the tool that's going to get us there, and we all need to be doing a good job of promoting this, whether we go to TCCIL or TACRO or TACE and present to the groups. That's the only way this amount of work that is being done is going to make an impact across the state. So I would say take a little bit of time to look at Dropbox, read all that went on yesterday, and if you have any questions, any of us that's in the task group will be able to hopefully answer some of your questions.
I see that Donna Carlin has come in, and she's been listening in. Donna, Dr. Tomerlin was here earlier and gave a little bit of an overview and an update. So you were actually on the agenda as well. If you,
I was? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I did have a quick question, though, for Dina as she gets up to leave about terminology. You mentioned the workshops for next summer of business, secretarial careers, and accounting. Isn't there a more up-to-date term than the secretarial careers? Does that reflect the SIP?
It actually is a softening of the SIP, because I think the SIP is administration and secretarial services. And so yesterday we had a little bit of discussion about that. We didn't have time for much, and we sort of umbrellaed it under secretarial careers rather than the secretarial services. I think it may be a place where the SIP descriptor is out of date and we need to do something better. I agree, Donna. We all agreed, had a little sidebar on it yesterday.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, and that might be the best term then.
For now, I think we can do better. Perhaps if when we look at, and this was a late thought, when we look at the names of the programs of study existing in the state, I think we might come up with better terminology, and we probably, I think one of the things we're going to be tasked doing is naming the statewide programs of study, and I don't sense any rule that says we have to use SIP descriptors to name those. And so we'll be able, that'll be part of the process I think we do with our business industry partners and our instructional specialists is now what do we name it? And I think we'll come up with something a lot better. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly I think, Donna, using the titles that business and industry indicate are the ones that they're advertising for and hiring for certainly will be a driver.
John, I was going to say, yes. I'm going to make a note then in our minutes that we probably, as we go back and develop that nomination form, need to acknowledge the fact that this may not be the name of the program as you have it at your institution.
Very good. Yes. Donna, I'd just like to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak on other topics that you believe are important for this group to hear about.
Well, just to expand on what Gary said earlier, this is really something that the programs of study has been an emphasis at the national level. And I think in Texas it's kind of come up pretty slowly. A lot of work's been done at the secondary level with Achieve Texas, and we are, slowly working our way at the post-secondary level. But this is really important work that needs to get done, and I know it's going to take a tremendous amount of work. But you have our full support in doing this. As far as Perkins reauthorization, no news, I guess, is good news. As I mentioned last week at the liaison meeting, which some of you were there, we had been hearing for a long time that WEA would be reauthorized first because they were 10 years in the making as being every year continued resolution, and they were reauthorized as the WEO last summer. So we're hoping that Perkins comes along next. There is some, it hasn't been fully developed yet, and we should be getting more information at the national level, but there is some implications for post-secondary funding, the admin funds, up to 1.5% having to go towards those one-stop centers. So we'll be getting more information about that, but that will, certainly have implications for Perkins and your funds. So, and another thing that I mentioned last week is that we will be looking at our the way that we provide the reallocation funds back to the colleges and having next year phasing in. This will go to the board in January. But our plans, if all goes through, are to provide up to 50% of the reallocation funds towards the schools that are doing well in 3 of the Perkins core indicators, 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1. And that's really completion, retention, and employment. So that will be a change. And then in 2 years, it would be 100% of the funds. And it's a lot of money. I mean, it's over $1 million that gets reallocated back to the colleges for the Perkins funds.
Yeah, Donna, just for clarification, I know there were a couple of folks that were asking me, and is this use of the weighting only applying to the reallocation of Perkins dollars, or will that be also the initial annual allocation?
No, it's just the reauthorization.
Reallocation?
Reallocation, yes.
Yeah. Okay,
yes.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, they would have nothing to do with the formula amount that you're given.
Very good.
That's an
important clarification. I think
absolutely
that that was squeezed in among many other things that day at the leadership liaison meeting, and I think some folks were not clear about exactly how that was going to be applied. So, thank you.
Yes. Okay. Any other questions?
Well, Donna, we thank you for your work and effort and the support of the project here. Thank you. I'm not hearing your transmission then.
I'm sorry. As I'm sitting here watching you all, I feel like some of you are feeling like I did last year when we began to talk about programs of study. What does this really look like? And Dina just mentioned that we will have probably 3 programs of study in the 3 clusters we'll be working on this summer. And then, what does this look like? At our last steering committee meeting, I presented materials from 5 different states so that we could collect some ideas about how other states were doing it. And basically we proposed some models so that we could have something visually to look at. We don't want to share those models because we don't want people to say, yeah, that's the way we're going to do it. Because we want the faculty to shape these models, but we want to be prepared with materials to say, Oklahoma went in this way, Florida went in this way, Oregon moved here, Washington did this, North Carolina. We tried to look at the best components of all of those states. And I will tell you, we have some tools that are very good in Texas. I was, couldn't keep from doing a little bit of comparison as I was spending all of this time looking at other states. I think we have some good things, Donna, and we'll have even better things in the future.
Thank you, Faye. In fact, I think there's another point that needs to be made here, not just for this group, but anybody that's listening to this or will hear it later. Those of us who have been involved in this work for a number of years now, we're not always going to be here. And so we need to make sure that we're putting processes in place that are sustainable over time. And one of the best ways that you can do that is to make sure that you have the proper tools. That's what Dina was referencing. So that those tools serve the needs of the state, regardless of the individual players that are involved. And so we are trying to make every effort possible to make sure that these tools are being built around empirical data that can be derived from information that the coordinating board collects related to the courses that get reported and the programs that are approved and all of that. And then that data is put into spreadsheets, and with the use of pivot tables and the work of the staff, Faye, especially working with Dwayne Hiller, to pull this data into usable spreadsheets that then can be presented before a body of knowledgeable administrators who have some actual on-the-ground expertise and understanding of how these programs are really working at their institutions, to validate what the data is saying, or to say that this bit of data is telling us something here, but the reality is that this is the way it actually happens out in the field. So as much as we can, we're going to use empirically driven information for decision-making purposes, but you cannot take the human element out of it, because the human element represents the knowledge and expertise that needs to be used as the decision-making element once you have good empirical data to work from. So, so I do see that forever we will have the need for individuals who are well knowledgeable of the content, the faculty, and we need and will have the need for the knowledgeable expertise of administrators and the practitioners who understand how that works throughout the institutions across the state. And so it's not just one institution or one type of institution that's driving this. It's the amalgamation of all the various types of institutions, large and small, metro and rural, and that you have the feeding of both the continuing ed and the credit all playing their appropriate role in making sure that we are providing the best mechanism for a document, a mechanism for a procedure and a process, and a mechanism of a set of tools that we can all use that will be beneficial to not just our institutions, but more importantly to the students and the communities that we're serving. So, having said all of that, then I
have a quick question.
Yes, ma'am.
That ties some of all of this together, and some we can talk about later in terms of TACE and CE. I don't think there's been a lot of dialogue how CE relates to programs of study, and it may be too late at the conference in terms of what's going to happen this summer, but looking at those programs that are going to be developed, those are key CE programs, right? You know, and especially with this move of doing a lot of the marketable skills certificates as CE as well, and a lot of the anyway, so definitely a program of study presentation at the conference so that people have an understanding of how that relates to CE. Good. What to take home to if they're not receiving dialogue from somebody, and what the next steps mean to us, because for some that may be a new program development. I mean, which is what TACE has kind of always been, to take home and create something new. But that needs to be dialogue from an expert of how CE and programs of study are going to work. and we can talk about it later, but we do need facilitator workshop training.
Okay.
And something else that I forgot, and we'll talk later.
All right. Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention, Kristen. Actually, I will be glad to respond just a little bit on that, but I want others who've been involved in the task group to respond as well. Early on, we did have some dialogue about the role of continuing education courses and programs of study. And it's not that we are not aware of that element. I guess, however, it's been partly just trying to deal with the task at hand first. But we've acknowledged all along, I think, at least in our conversation, that if you look at what we're really supposed to be about in our or individual organizations and across the state, is about lifelong learning, and continuing ed is certainly a great important element of that lifelong learning aspect. But from a more practical standpoint, there are particular discipline areas which, through either professional or state statutory mandates, require continuing education as a part of professional development, as a part of continuation of certifications and so on. So I do see that CE has an appropriate place to play in terms of our programs of study processes. So far, we have not gotten to the point of fully fleshing out how that is going to play out. But it needs to be worked on, that's for sure. Yeah, Kurt.
And I've got a comment thinking backwards to real estate last summer.
Yes.
That's a program of study. It's a single program of study. It's delivered both either as CE or credit, depending on which college you're at.
Right.
And so, although we haven't had that much conversation, there may be other shorter programs of studies that are mirrored. And in that respect, CE is right there hand in hand with credit. CE as standalone pieces of programs of study we really haven't delved into, and I'm not sure where that's going to take us. But that last summer's real estate was a good and a challenging one to pick for a variety of reasons, but it did bring up even CE.
Right.
Right.
I'd like to add a comment. Kristen, I think that you've made a really important point that there are clearly implications, and we need to start dealing with them. I think probably what we really need, and Kirk, of course, is a good representative, is people who are really understanding the program study process, who are looking at it through the CE perspective, and what are those implications, and helping us both identify the implications and maybe work back to process on what we need to do to alter process to make sure that CE is included. Kirk, you're right on. Real estate clearly had implications.
And I'd like to suggest at the conference, if you want the program of study presentation, that we make it both a presentation and a brainstorming session to let the CE people tell us, after they hear the big picture of where we're going, what's coming up for them. Where do they see CE sit at? And then bring that back to the task group.
That's good, yeah. We need all the minds involved on what those implications are.
Yeah, and we have guidelines from GIPWE, and that needs to be looked at too as part of this mix because of the hours, the limits on some of the certificates through CE. There are some implications there. And those of you that I work closely with CE, obviously my campus does a lot of customized training for major corporations. And one of the challenges we're having it's the globalization of all of these industries, and we get a lot of these companies that want to do work with Europe or Asia, and they're not going to get into business unless the facilities are meeting the international requirements, and some of the people leading those groups have to become certified. So obviously the only avenue is through CE. There's really no other avenue because they want short time training. They want to get it done today. So I think, yes, we need to really pay attention on how we're going to be able to help CE get these programs of studies so they work for you guys. And it impacts me because a lot of those people come back anyways to credit, either to complete a degree or complete a certificate on our side. So we really need to look at this closely.
Don, may I just
Sure,
one thing?
please.
I think in the workshops with the business and industry, it may also bring out areas where there are feeder programs into the AAS degrees that can be addressed through the non-credit side. So I think as we work with business and industry, keeping that in mind on both sides, then after the AAS, the professional development on the other end. Business and industry at these workshops are going to drive that.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, Robin brings up a good point, and we really haven't talked about that much, Dina, Faye, or anybody else, myself even, about the role of business and industry in these workshops. And in fact, that is really the upfront most important aspect. And so we actually, early on, the task group had for the, the Program of Study Steering Committee had made recommendations on a guide manual for the Program of Study project, and contained in that guide is a set of protocols or procedures by which the project would elicit nominations of business and industry representatives. And so now that we are chronologically, timeline-wise, bringing both the Program of Study workshop and the Wecm workshops together during the same calendar time, I want to make sure that the leadership committee understands clearly that this procedure for eliciting business and industry nominations will be used as the mechanism by which we're going to try to secure nominations for the business and industry representatives. This won't be, because I'm pulling it from memory, and others may remember better than I, but to give a sense, not the entire list, but to give a sense to you, we have Lee Rector, who is the executive director overseeing the Texas Workforce Industry Council, TWIC, at the state level, working out of the governor's office, has indicated that her organization will try to lend its organization's efforts towards making sure that they can aid in identification of business and industry representatives to serve on any of these program of study committees from the business and industry perspective. We also identified your local workforce boards, chambers of commerce, your local program advisory committee members from your institutions, any state or national professional organizations representing that particular industry area. So there's a fairly lengthy list of checkpoints that we're going to be using to try to elicit a good array of business and industry representatives in that program area from across the state, so that this is not so that it doesn't wind up being just, 3 or 4 people from one local area of the state driving these recommendations, that this be a minimum of 10 business and industry representatives, and as broadly representative of the industry itself, geographically and technologically and in all other aspects, so that we can feel some assurance that the recommendations that we're getting from these business and industry representatives really is statewide representation of the ideas and concepts that we need to pay attention to. Is there anybody else that would like to kind of offer up any more about that? But I think we were remiss in not really spending a little bit more time talking about this aspect of it, though, because it is a really, really critical component. Because it's going to be the business and industry people who are going to help serve as the drivers of what are the program level learning outcomes that we need to pay attention to. Okay. We are at about 11:12. We've been here seated for about 2 hours now almost, so I'm going to call for a 10-minute break so that you can get up and stretch, go to the restrooms, catch up on brief emails or phone calls, and then we'll reconvene in 10 minutes. Thank you. Our break, and so I'd like to proceed through the agenda. So where we are at this point is Kirk White is going to present a recommended protocol change related to TASTE Course Review Committee. So, Kurt?
Okay. Just a little background from last meeting, why we're doing this. The TASTE Wecm Committee took over the review of continuing education, special topic, and local needs courses several years ago as a way to remove part of the time in the summer workshops and to also allow CE experts to work on the CE courses that have been submitted. And so it's worked very well over the last few years, and we had something, or a new situation kind of arise in this last year, in that a lot of the people that are now on that committee aren't necessarily part of the original group that created the committee, and people are transitioning off, and we basically forgot that we should include an orientation for every year before they do their work. They really need to have an orientation, just like the facilitators do at the workshops in the summer, to update them on any new process, remind them what their task is, remind them all the steps and all the tools that they need to use. So we went back, and I say we, Kristen Walker, Kathy Ashworth, and Robin Garrett and I went back and looked at protocol number 2-05-01, which outlines the role of the TASTE Wecm Committee. And we've built in a few new pieces to include the orientation as well as a couple of other things. For the folks in the room, you have it up on the screen here. For those who were in the task force yesterday, you also have it in your book. The one in the book looks a little different than what you see here because I'd originally put in the qualifications for membership and the rotations, and after talking with Catherine this morning, that's really procedural, it's not protocol, so we removed those two sections. And what's left behind here are the additions to the process that will ensure that orientation happens and that the committee has the support it needs to do the work each year, no matter how new the people might be on the committee. So going through it, that first change or addition, if the chair is not currently a Wecm facilitator, a current experienced Wecm facilitator will be assigned to the committee that year to act as a mentor for the process and provide an orientation to the members of the committee prior to the start of the review process. The chair is always the past president of TACE. The first couple of years, that always meant that a facilitator type person was already in that position, but that's not always going to be the case, as was last year. And so we're basically adding a facilitator to the process who's experienced in the Wecm review process to support the group. If you can scroll down a little bit, Dwayne. As for the steps, we just clarified some of the steps of the work of the committee each year. We included in number 1 the drafting of the schedule for the committee. It'll be drafted every fall to include all the key dates for the committee orientation assignment, to review tasks and meetings for members, and deliverable due dates. And I'm going to show you what the 2015 schedule looks like, because we were asked to make sure certain things happened in a certain amount of time for starting next year because of the new workshop structure. Number 2, either the TACE Wecm committee chair or the assigned Wecm facilitator mentor will provide an orientation to the TACE Wecm committee members, reviewing all of the protocols involved in the Wecm course review and the goals for the committee's work. And in a few minutes, I'll also show you the outline of that orientation that y'all asked that we bring back an outline so we can get some feedback to make sure we're covering everything. And then eventually we will adapt a PowerPoint that can be used by the facilitator or chair to do that orientation. The rest of the steps were already in the protocol. They've just been renumbered. So if we can scroll down to the next one that's actually still blue. And we added one additional step. Prior to submitting the deliverables from the TACE Wecm committee review process to the Wecm project staff, so after the committee's done all their work, prior to turning in the outcomes of that work to the staff, the Wecm facilitator mentor or the committee chair, if that committee chair is a facilitator, will review the deliverables for accuracy and compliance with Wecm protocol one last time. And actually, Kathy did that with me this year for the last process, and we actually found a few things and that's where this orientation need sort of popped up, is like, well, why did we write a new course here? It's a good course, but it wasn't triggered. So there was some work done when there wasn't a trigger and that kind of thing. So we just thought that was a good extra step to add to the process as a final check, and then it all is turned into the Wecm staff, and the process goes as the protocol was previously written. So I guess what we're asking is the committee to consider and approve the additions and amendments to this protocol so that we can start using this protocol for the spring 2015 process.
Okay, so Leadership Committee, I'm going to take this as a motion for acceptance of this protocol revision as presented. If I get a second, then we can open the floor for discussion. Do I hear a second? Okay, Kristen Walker seconded. So it is now open for discussion. This is your time, folks, if in fact you have any recommended changes or modifications.
And we'll still then look at the schedule and the outline for the orientation, but right now we're just looking at the verbiage of the protocol.
I'd like to I don't have any recommendations or changes because I was obviously involved with the development of this.
I would hope not.
But the first year that we did this, and it was initially set up, and I was getting this going, being a facilitator, it didn't even dawn on us as we progressed through, and then Kurt took it over, that we could have that lapse in experience from the perspective of the past chair of TACE. We never thought that person, we never thought that far ahead, that person might not have that kind of background. So this was very needed to adjust in this protocol.
Okay. Any other comments?
I had one question, and having not seen the schedule yet, does the schedule have a hard date in it?
Yeah.
And the reason I ask that, Kurt, is making sure that from what the deliverables are, that they then get back to the Wecm project executive director in time to be available for the workshops.
Yes, it does. And why don't we just bring up the schedule, or do you want to wait? Or
Go ahead and do that.
Dwayne,
That's part of this discussion. So.
there it is. So really, the schedule has sort of operated in this way for several years. What we did was now ensure that it all ends to give time to do Model 2 workshops before the summer workshops, right? It originally was in time for the summer workshops, but now we're doing more Model 2s that might be informed by what the CE group does, and we need the CE work done before any of the Model 2s or the summer start. So just scrolling down, I mean, this is pretty detailed. It's basically, when do we get the information from the coordinating board? When does the chair start working with the committee? When are they due with their work? When do they hold their virtual meeting? All of that is in there. And by April 6th, everything is turned in to the staff, the Wecm staff, giving most of April and May to do Model 2 workshops prior to the summer workshops.
I guess then I'm going to have to turn to Faye and say, is April 6th sufficient time for you and Karen to do what you need to do with the special topics local need deliverables to have it available? And also then, we said that we wanted the Model 2s to be held in the spring, but did we set a time in the spring? Because April is cutting it pretty short.
Yeah, well, actually what we have said, Catherine, in the past is that we just need to make sure that the Model 2s are conducted before the end of the spring semester, because some of these faculty who are going to serve on the Model 2 workshops are adjuncts.
Yeah.
Because they tend to be, the whole purpose behind identification of a Model 2 workshop, for just as a reminder, it's a program that exists at 5 or fewer colleges throughout the state. So when you have a program that's limited to that few number of institutions, we have found just through experience that the faculty who are teaching in these programs, some of those faculty are basically industry type experts who are actually adjuncts. And so they're not under contract after the semester is over. So the conundrum that we've been faced with over time is that if we try to have these Model 2 workshops during the summertime, then we can't get to the faculty who are teaching these courses because they're off contract. So anyway, so we've backed up doing Model 2 workshops so that they are done before the spring semester is over, which, Catherine, the truth of the matter is, just given all the materials that we've got to pull together and everything, I think that probably the facilitator who volunteers to do work with these Model 2s are going to wind up being sometime in the month of May.
Okay.
And if I could add, wrangling the Model 2 people together can happen earlier in the spring, and should. The actual schedule of the work of the Model 2 group would be in April or May.
Okay.
It's not like we'd have to start the process then. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah, and we identified which courses, set of courses they are already, so we could get people early on.
And this process is only reviewing what's happening that summer, the SIPs in that year, I should say, Model 2 or not. And so
Right.
Because those of you that had to do Model 2s the last few years know what it was like, trying to get people to come to the table. And it wasn't a good experience for some people. I know Robin tried calling people all over the state, ended up maybe just one person.
Yeah, there are several workshops, though, that even after getting them together, they decided themselves to hold it later on in the summer. So you have to be more flexible with the faculty, ensuring that you get as many as you can with those Model 2s.
And quite frankly, folks, we cannot force those institutions if they don't want to be involved in a review of their courses for those programs. We can't force them. So, this is strictly a kind of a voluntary effort. But what we're trying to demonstrate as a leadership committee is that we're doing everything on our side to ensure review of these courses and inclusion. That's right.
I'd like to add a couple of comments. One is that the product that comes from the TASTE Review Committee is so well organized, it just that was our experience in Midland. It slides right on into the workshops. There's not a lot of work to be done on the receiving end. And so that makes for a lot of efficiency. And then the other one is, Kirk, I really appreciate that last validation step in your process.
Yes.
Holding true to the triggers. We've all worked with groups that kind of go, kind of go beyond their mission and start doing things, and you can see how that happens, and it happens in our Wecm workshops.
Well, and this follow-up check is kind of like what the lead facilitators do at the end of the workshop.
Yeah.
Is that secondary check. They haven't been involved in the gory details along the way, and it's still a fresh set of eyes that can look at it.
I think it's really important, and even a reminder to us in the regular workshops, use the triggers, follow the protocol for how a course gets put in the Wecm. So I really think it's a great step, and I appreciate the thoughtfulness of it.
Good. Well, we've had good discussion. Anybody else?
Don, I know that you had sent out an email thanking Kirk and Robin and myself and Kathy, but I mean, in all honesty, it's Kirk and certainly Robin that led this. I'm one of those that didn't have the experience. Nobody on the board has the experience. So what we experienced this year, Kirk, is going to be no different in the years to come. So that's why my request is that we have to do some facilitator training, at least with CE folks, so that we have them. But we also need to find a way to get somebody involved in one of these reviews somehow, some way, even if it's just auditing or sitting on the sidelines, because there's nobody else on the board as it stands right now that has even been a part of a review process.
Well, certainly we've allowed in the past opportunities for people, especially CE folks, to serve as observers of the Wecm process. So that's certainly a good possibility.
And when it comes to the Wecm facilitator training, developing new facilitators, I know when I started, I always heard that, it's primary college credit faculty who are the instructional specialists, and that for CE to be represented and remembered through the process of a summer workshop, it's good to have a lot of CE people as the facilitators. So maybe as we look at the next training, we really push the board to think about becoming facilitators and or recruiting.
And they're ready.
Okay.
It was part of our conversation.
Good.
If you recall the last time that I was here, and I was like, that's going to be me, and I've not done it. But we didn't need facilitators, so we haven't done the facilitator training. So if that continues to be the case, we certainly respect that and understand that. But CE people need it.
Well, in fact, later on the agenda, before the day is out, we actually have that as an agenda item, is to talk about facilitator training. So anything else specific to the protocol recommendations? A motion was accepted, and with a second, we've had our discussion.
There was one typo on number 6.
I think I got it, but go ahead and
that also.
Scroll up a little bit.
Scroll up a little. It's the old number 4, I think.
Yeah, review.
Yeah.
That's a
space.
There was a space
That's striking that space.
Oh, good.
That's
All
there.
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I must have turned off track changes.
All right, well, the chair will now call for a vote. All in favor of accepting the protocol changes as modified in this discussion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion passes, and we have a new change now to the Wecm protocol.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted a little bit of feedback is now that we say we have to orient the committee, what do we orient them on? This is what we came up with. If we just scroll down a little bit, basically, the orientation, of course, would include the introduction of all the members on the committee, a little bit of the history and purpose of the Taste Wecm Committee and why they're involved in this process. I thought would be good, just so they understand the importance of it and the work that they're doing and how it contributes to the rest of the workshop processes. Then the project staff would have to go through the paperwork process because the members of the committee who do this work also do get stipends similar to facilitators and workshops. So there's the paperwork process on the finance end of things. Then we review the schedule like you just saw. The committee protocol, we would review the protocol that we just approved and go through it in detail. Talk about when to write new courses and the triggers that are involved in that. A little bit of the writing of new courses like we do with facilitator and instructional specialist training at the workshops, what makes a good outcome, what makes a good description, all of that. And then all the tools that are used, which are the same tools that are used in the summer workshop. And then question and answer. So we would basically take, and Joe's already sent me the basic or instructional specialist, I forget which one I asked for, facilitator refresher PowerPoint that he has redone. And once I got this outline okayed from y'all, then I was going to go back and adapt that with the same format and everything for the committee before we have to use it in the spring. Anything else you think needs to be included in this orientation? Because they're acting as instructional specialists is what they are in this process. So.
All right. It's my sense that this is not something that has to be approved by the committee through a motion.
No.
It's just this is for information.
Feedback, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Yes, this has just been brought to my attention in case this is a vehicle owned by one of you. Gray Volkswagen, license plate DRG06. Your lights are on. Okay. All right, so you can go ahead. Why don't you go ahead? Yeah. You don't want to run your battery down. In fact, the chair is inquiring, is this, Faye, it looks like the coordinating board staff is over here trying to get our lunch ready. Is lunch actually? Okay. All right. Well, I think this is a good time then for the committee to agree to take a 30-minute break for lunch. So we'll reconvene at 12:20. Thank you. That we can get through the remainder of the agenda and possibly get out just a little bit earlier than what was projected, given the weather conditions, especially those who drove in and need to get back in their vehicles and try to get out of Austin this afternoon before the bad traffic hits. So I will endeavor to try to take care of the appropriate business that we need to, but also make sure that we can finish up in time to let folks try to get to the airport or on the road. We're now at our agenda item related to committee and project updates and recommendations, and Faye Murphy is going to give us kind of an overview related to the 2016 program of study and Wecm workshops. Your mic, you've got a mic there in front of you.
The big one.
Before.
See the red light?
It's the red light on.
Okay, you're live then.
As I indicated earlier, we will be looking at 4 career clusters in the summer of 2016, and that may seem to be a long time away, but we really do have to start our planning now so that I can have a broad plan ready when it's time to write the proposal, and that will occur sometime in March. I like to do that during spring break. The areas we'll be working on, and I'm sure a lot of people will be eager to hear, what programs will be involved. First of all, Cluster 3 will be arts and AV, and that includes all of the radio, television, graphic communication, and commercial arts and advertising arts. If you go in to look at the graduate data, you're going to realize that we have a number of AS degrees in these areas, academic degrees, and it appears that all of the follow-up data, the graduates reflect all of those graduates. So this is going to be something we're going to have to really look at as we begin to determine what our workload will be. The second group is manufacturing. We will be covering heavy industry equipment and maintenance, as well as mining and well as mechanical and engineering related careers. So this is going to be a pretty broad area. The next area will be transportation. And this is where we'll get into aircraft, auto body, and all of the transportation modes. And the last one, and probably the one that we'll all be challenged to handle, is computer science, which is Cluster 11. This has been the biggest challenge for Wecm in the past because it's really hard to write courses that are timely, and we have to get rid of them too whenever they're obsolete. So I'm looking forward to this to see how we can develop state programs of study that really can help give us direction on the other side. I truly believe that we will have a minimum of 4 programs of study with specializations. But that may not be possible. It may be more, but it will be at least 4. So you can see the workload is going to be pretty heavy for that. And you have those materials. Wait just a minute. I guess I didn't.
No.
You have those materials in your Dropbox.
Right.
If you want to look at them so you can see. It was called to my attention that I had one error, and I'll get that corrected before you all get home and can go to the Dropbox. But they're outlined, and you can see the number of graduates and see the workload that is ahead. We have a lot of courses, a lot of different rubrics, and that may be our challenge as to how we can group these workshops so we can get expertise across so many different rubrics. Okay, Don?
Okay. Now, Faye just mentioned that transportation is one of the zip codes cluster areas that we'll be looking at in 2016. But let me bring to your attention, folks, an item that came to the attention of Dr. Tomerlin, and he alerted me to this particular meeting that's going to occur actually on Friday. The Texas Aviation Maintenance Technical Schools, there's kind of a group comprised of colleges that offer aviation-related programs. That group is being called together to meet this Friday at Tarrant County Northwest Campus to discuss FAA Part 147, airframes and power plant regulations. And I actually did a little research myself on this once I was made aware of it. Dr. Tarmerlin included me in on some email exchanges that had occurred with the Texas Aviation Maintenance Technical Schools and with him, because the concern was being expressed by some of the schools that there is an anticipation of some final postings of regulation changes being proposed by FAA for airframes and power plant. Actually, this rules making has been in play for like 4 or 5 years, in fact. But it's kind of slowly wound its way through at the national level. A oversight committee comprised of individuals from these schools on the national level who took a look at some draft regulation changes back about 4 years ago, and they made some recommendations to the FAA. The FAA had to take time to review those recommendations and so on and so forth. So anyway, all that is to say is at the federal level, the wheels of government grind very slowly, we know. And so it appears, however, that FAA is potentially ready to, sometime around the first of the year, post for public comment their final versions of these rules changes. And what it really boils down to is taking the configuration of the required number of contact hours per specific courses and modifying those some. And right now, some of the schools have airframes certification and then a separate certification for power plant. And then some schools put them together and offer A&P certifications. And that's going to be apparently a little bit more problematic because of the potential change in regulations where the hours, up to this point, those hours were 1,500 hours were evenly divided between airframes 750 and airframe 750 and power plant. And now it's getting ready to change. One's going to be 100 hours less and another one's going to be 100 hours more. So those institutions that have kind of co-jointly offered the certification, just from a credit hour point of view, how all that plays out. So potentially what the concern is with also the state mandate now for the 60 credit hour limitation, the concern is whether or not they could maybe run into a problem with those hours. So as the chair, I was invited to attend this meeting because potentially what's being at least thought that these requirements may kick into play before next fall. So, or at least before we would do the 2016 review. So it so happens that Raphael, as the immediate past chair, his institution has that program, and so he was going to be involved in that meeting as well anyway. So the two of us will actually be attending this meeting on Friday at Tarrant County. Wanted to cue you up as to what this might mean, we have folks as a part of our protocol for triggers for Wecm workshops, changes in certification requirements. And so what I'm alluding to is that there may be, out of necessity, a requirement for us to process a workshop in Wecm fashion to modify courses in this curriculum area out of cycle. But again, our protocols already have taken that kind of thing into account. So I'm just giving the whole committee a heads up. Raphael and I will be reporting back to this group after this meeting is over. He and I'll get our heads together to see if we think that it's going to necessitate a special workshop sometime fairly soon to deal with this issue, or whether or not it's something that can be dealt with next summer. We'll just see. In that same vein, let me also give you a heads up on another situation. Dr. Tomerlin also copied me on an email exchange that just came through this week, on Monday, in fact. This is from the State Board of Evaluation of Interpreters, so it's BEI, update related to sign language interpreters. And without reading the whole thing, it says, please allows me to introduce myself. I am the director of the DARS, Office for the Deaf and Hearing of Hearing Services, DHHS. I believe your office may have been acquainted with various individuals previously employed by DHHS, but I'd like to take this opportunity to share with you some of the roles and priorities of this office and how we would like to partner with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board to improve services rendered in Texas. And basically it says 14 of the programs are at community colleges offering 2-year interpreter training, while the University of Houston offers a 4-year interpreter training program. Few students graduating from these programs are fully equipped to pass a BEI exam and become certified as sign language interpreters. BEI is undergoing many exciting changes, including implementing a system that will allow us to track each interpreter training student taking a BEI exam and to identify test candidates' strengths and areas of further study. We would like to partner with the coordinating board to share our analysis and overview of the trends of the interpreter programs in Texas to assist in enhancing its curriculum. It is our hope that this additional information will better equip trained interpreter students who are striving to become certified. The new tracking system should be operational by the end of 2015 spring semester. So again, this is just a heads up to this group that this may have in the future some implications for us as we look at programs of study and then Wecm workshops. So, okay. Earlier, there was some discussion related to facilitator and training workshops, and Faye actually had this on the agenda for discussion, in fact, by this group. So we had a little bit of dialogue on this in the task group meeting yesterday about next summer's workshops. And Faye has a list of individuals who have gone through the facilitator training process, those who we have used as facilitators, those who've gone through what we call FIT, facilitator and training, orientation, and some of those individuals we still have not had an opportunity yet to utilize them as a facilitator actually in a workshop. But Faye kind of give us an overview of where things stand at this point. Microphone, please.
I believe you'll find a copy of the summary of facilitators on your back page of your, and for those individuals that were here yesterday, it's in your notebook. If you'll notice in the column number 2, I have an X, and that X indicates that person worked this year at one or more workshops. I did not designate how many times they worked. And then you have a list that I have no record of them working, even though I know some of them did, simply because I worked with them. I do not know how many of these people are no longer available. They may have retired. Maybe they've moved on to another job. So I don't know the status of what we have available. I know that for this summer, we have enough trained people to serve as facilitators. However, I'm not so confident that we would have enough for the next year, which only leads me to say, I believe we must have a facilitator training workshop, maybe prior to TACTI in the spring or some other time, so that we can train some individuals who can come and observe this summer and be ready for the next year. I'd like to hear your comments because you all were working when I was away on retirement.
Well, given what Kristen brought to our attention related to the TACE boards, the individuals serving on the current board of TACE and then individuals in the TACE organization as members, the need for CE folks to have the opportunity at least to go through a facilitator training. So that's something that I think this group needs to seriously consider, is at least providing that opportunity, if not at TACTI, at least at TACE.
I'd like to kind of ask a little bit of clarification from Kristen on that. Kristen, is the need for, I think there's probably 2 things popping up here, maybe even 3. One is the need for leadership in TACE, new leadership in TACE, to have a competence and understanding in the Wecm workshop process and so forth, and how Wecm works overall. Then secondly, I heard another layer of need, which is that for CE people to engage in the workshop process, be there, probably starting to look down the road at how to connect programs of study and so forth. And then I also heard willing to facilitate kind of thing. So I guess what I don't want to train people to be facilitators and then not use them to be facilitators. Does that make sense? It goes cold and it feels like maybe you weren't being treated right or something, you know. But so is it possible that we need in general to do a session for TACE folks on Wecm, how it works, what it is, et cetera, that's not necessarily facilitator training? Just to get everybody up to speed, maybe whoever wanted to on the board or whatever.
Well, we've done that. That is something that we do with Wecm 101, if you will. It's been done
every conference,
almost every conference.
But it's the the functionality of the workshop itself.
And it's
that
probably,
extra workshop piece, yeah.
Right, and we've talked to some degree even just higher level. You know, I mean, obviously in a 50-minute session, there's only so much information.
Sure.
And a lot of that 101 stuff, we do GIPWE 101 and Wecm, you know, are intended for the new people. But clearly we have some that have after 3 years you're tenured in CE, you know what I mean? But we don't have the historians in all districts and on all campuses. And so there is a higher level of Wecm that's needed. Yeah, well, you don't have anybody in the board to follow through, to do the facilitate what needs to be done on our side. So it's about what I see TACE is supposed to be doing is developing leaders as the rest of you guys have gone on. So will some of those that are there now, and then some of you won't you'll be a phone call away, but won't be where you are now either. And so,
well, a good part of the facilitator process is, and so it sounds like facilitator training really probably will fit, is being a facilitator in training, which means that if we did facilitator training this year, we could have facilitators in training at the big workshop in the summer. I mean, we only have one, but that'd still be a great opportunity. So we'd get the rising tide effect of the training, plus have people ready to facilitate down the road. So, yeah, that's helpful. I see where you're coming from, and we do want to develop the leadership. But what we don't want to do is train people to be facilitators who that's not really what they want to do. They just want to know more about Wecm. Or train people to be facilitators who don't get to facilitate. Does that make sense? Right. So,
if I might comment real quickly, I'm MCE, and I asked my dean to nominate me the last time this opportunity came open. So I don't feel like CE programs have not had the opportunity to get involved in the past. They have. So I think that same opportunity to alleviate people that just want to learn more about Wecm, trying to get training and then they drop off the radar, would help make this effort more efficient as a leadership team. And there are multiple CE program people on this leadership team itself, so I think they would be more than happy to help TACE become a little more knowledgeable if they need. That's just my comment. I feel like this team has done a really good job of involving CE personally.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it hasn't.
Sure.
I think it's just, I don't think it's been that at all. It's how many hats each person wears and at what point the opportunity came open and then who's serving in leadership at TACE at this moment.
Right,
right.
It's new leadership issues, emerging leadership issues, yeah.
I agree with Dina, about training and then not using them. That creates a problem because people are going to expect to be appointed. But I'd like to make a recommendation. I think we have quite a few of you here that have served in TACTI on the board, obviously TACE. But I think if you want to be in those leadership positions in one of those organizations, you should have a thorough knowledge of Wecm, whether it's the programs of study or the summer workshop for Wecm. I don't want to say that should be made a requirement, but if you're in the workforce area, it's really an obligation of you to be serving on one of these boards, to either attend some kind of a training, and I'm not going to put our group here to design this training, but you should attend something so you can represent workforce across the state and not put out bad answers or no answers at all to the community. So I don't know if the FIT training is the correct place for them to attend, but we really need to come up with something. If you end up on the TACE or the TACTI board, that says a lot about you. So there's also that other added responsibility to become familiar with what Wecm is all about.
Yeah, I think my questioning had to do with, are we seeing a new training need in addition to facilitator training that's more than 101? Kirk's shaking his head no. But 101 is a pretty light, and if you've seen it once, you don't want to see it again. It's, but.
My initial reaction is it's more of a recruiting need than a training need. I think we've got we could beef up what's done in the conference, even turn that 50-minute into a pre-conference maybe, I don't know, on the basics of Wecm. But I don't think just putting people at the same time into facilitator training to learn Wecm is the answer too. Okay. It's getting key leadership CE people into facilitator roles.
Really engaged. And so
that's how I see it.
And so I think what I've heard is then we need to probably do the FIT training, do the facilitator training, do the FIT piece, which is go to the workshops, and then also, Don, you mentioned earlier opening up the opportunity to come to the workshops and observe.
Observers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And if I can make an observation, this next round of Wecm workshops, POS Wecm workshops, whole new ball game, right?
Right.
There are more people active on the list than are going to be able to participate next year.
That's right.
So those people that don't get to participate this coming year will participate fresh with the POS model in the year after.
Right.
If we have some fits this next year that can carry some of that knowledge over to those people in the next year, then we might have a little more perpetuating.
We're
of the
going to
new
have to
model.
adapt that training significantly based on programs of study work.
Right.
And you're almost going to have a two-strand kind of training. One is if you're facilitating Wecm course review only, or if you're facilitating program of study development with Wecm course review. I mean, we haven't kind of worked out those personnel
The way we
needs
looked at
yet.
the chart yesterday, the Venn diagram, whatever diagram it was, there will be those that are facilitating POS that will slide into the Wecm facilitation and be joined with more Wecm facilitators. So, I mean, they all need to know it.
Yep.
Well, and also, we kind of skipped over it yesterday in the task group, but this new model Don mentioned, and I think very reasonably, that by the end of this new workshop approach, we're going to have some worn out people. So we may really want to go into this with extra staffing of facilitators and even do some switching off. You're facilitating POS, you stay in the room, but the other person takes over on the course review. So there'll be room for more people to get engaged.
Yeah.
So.
And let me clarify, too, when I was talking about doing the facilitator training or whatever it really needs to be, that's what I envisioned was key leadership, not being a general session for anybody to taste. To
Right.
go through.
So possibly, just out of curiosity, Kristen, possibly could this be something that when you have your board meeting, that there might be a willingness for a specific hour and a half or 2 hour period of the board meeting being dedicated to nothing but Wecm workshop processes?
Perfect. Yes.
I would also maybe challenge the board to identify a key leader from every one of the 6 regions to participate in the next facilitator training.
Yeah.
Then again, it was hard to fill the Wecm committee in the first place, but we'll see what you could do.
Yeah, Joe?
So, we talk about the Wecm 101 that gets shown at TASE every year and how it's geared towards individuals who really have never had any exposure to Wecm, the new incoming administrators. When you talk about doing a Wecm workshop process training, I don't think you'll get quite the variety of administrators that you're looking for, because I know they're not really concerned about what's going on at the workshop. They just want to know, is there a better way that they can go into the system, to use the system? They've been in their administrative role for, say, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
101 is not for them.
Right.
Workshop process is not really for them.
Right.
So something kind of in the middle that's more of a advanced Wecm, advanced.
Actually, Joe, I really get what you're saying, because actually that's part of what we struggled with yesterday with this intro to Wecm that you're going to see, this PowerPoint presentation. That is kind of like the Wecm 101 that you're talking about. It's for the person who's not familiar with Wecm at all. And I guess part of what the task group was saying yesterday to Mindy and to Dr. Tomerlin was that while that is certainly an important learning tool, what we're also seeing the absence of and the need for that Wecm 201. It's the next level up. It's the follow-up information beyond the introduction.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. Is that what we need in addition to facilitator training, is a more in-depth Wecm training for people who might not ever want to facilitate a workshop.
Right.
But they want to be engaged in a leadership role with Wecm. Yeah.
And, when we're talking about TASE, that Wecm 201 where they want to go in, I see one of the key differences between that and a facilitator training is once they get past the 201 at the facilitator level, then they need to know about all of the rules for undergraduate programs and degree programs that are different from CE.
Right.
Which would be necessary before they could be an effective facilitator.
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
And that
Right.
audience doesn't really discuss that usually.
Point well taken, Joe. What Joe is really basically saying is that someone who has been living in the CE world only may not have all of the understandings that they would need to have if they were to actually serve as a facilitator at a Wecm workshop, because you have to have understanding of the requirements and guidelines that impact the credit side. And so a person who's been limited in their experience level to continuing education only would not possess the knowledge is necessarily important to serve as a facilitator. Yeah, good point.
May I respectfully disagree?
Okay. Sure.
Or I don't know if I disagree or not.
Sure.
The role of the facilitator is to facilitate the process of the review of Wecm courses. I think it's beneficial to know all of the other structural and regulatory degree program information, but I myself have always been in CE.
Right.
I've never lived in credit, very closely next door to,
right.
and play with, a
on
lot.
The perimeters. Yeah.
But it's, the instructional specialists carry a lot of that knowledge into the room as well as the lead facilitator. So there's some that is helpful. I don't know if it's critical for a good facilitator to know all of the...
So you're questioning the requisite of that knowledge?
I think where I was going on that was if we're going to be building programs of study...
That's where I was bringing it.
Yeah.
Not just doing the course review.
Yeah.
So is a program of study facilitator different than a
Yes,
Wecm facilitator?
I think so, Kirk. I think they're not just going to be facilitating and obtaining information. They're going to have to help build a program.
Right.
And so that's not to say that it couldn't be developed, and that's not it. It's just that we're going to want, I think, and this is the first time we've talked about that.
Oh, first time. I mean, we're talking about two different types of facilitators.
Yes, we are.
Exactly.
And that's a good point. But your facilitator for a POS workshop is going to have to not only know the current rules for programs of study, but be really grounded in whatever rules are evolving and emerging for new statewide programs of study, so they can, shape the structuring that's going on. Whatever that is, it's a discussion we haven't had, but it's a different role. And
I just heard Steve say SACS, and there's a role in there of understanding SACS requirements.
So this has protocol implications in how we define facilitators.
Oh, it does.
Yes, it does.
It certainly does.
Absolutely.
It really does.
I have to agree with Kurt, though. The Wecm facilitator.
The traditional role of the facilitator.
Right. The traditional role of a Wecm facilitator truly can be easily learned, because the main thing is the contact hour chart. If you think about it, that if once you get that down, I think the rest of it's.
Yeah, and a lot of that is understanding group dynamics and how to manage a meeting and how to make sure that the task is accomplished in the set of time that you have and all of that. So.
But the program of study is definitely where it takes a different level.
Yep.
Yeah, it does have protocol implications. We're going to have to think that through.
Yep, sure does.
But we do agree, sort of. We agree that we've got two different things now that we really haven't ferreted out the differences between.
The conversation started with CE needing the training, but I think we need to look at the whole gamut of workforce, because we have people in positions of deans and vice presidents that don't have the knowledge of what it takes to put a program of study together, the relationship with industry, if they are going to participate or create a program of study at their institution, how are they going to do that if they don't have the knowledge of how the program of study works? And what are the restrictions that the coordinating board is going to put on programs of study? What changes can you make from the prescribed set of courses if there are going to be limits? So all of that has to be explained, not just to CE, but the credit side also.
And there are also maybe some good implications for teaming there too, because as you move from creating a program of study to course review, so protocol implications all over the place on that one, yeah.
And again, one of the things that, at least over a period of time, that we'll be living with are, and we discussed this some yesterday at the task group, is the fact that not every course in a particular six-digit zip code rubric area that is currently in the Wecm, not every course will become a part of a specific statewide program of study. And so you're still going to have some courses in the Wecm inventory that are sitting there not a part of a program of study, including CE courses. And so this, again, is where I'm, in my own head, am still trying to wrap my understanding around how we will need to function in these summer workshops when we have a set of courses that are going to reside outside of the purview of this program of study that we're building, but are actually still critically important to our workforce process. And we owe it to ourselves to make sure that we have clearly thought through how we're going to ensure the currency of those courses, especially on the CE side. So that's why I was saying earlier, in my own mind's eye, I want to make sure that people have a sense of understanding that while program study is certainly a driver and will impact a lot of what we do for Wecm, it will not be 100% the driver of all Wecm, because we've got at least the CE that will reside not as a part of Wecm program of study, but is still a part of Wecm. And so that too is where we're going to have, in some respects, multitasked facilitators, some of which are going to be conversant and knowledgeable of how to deal with going from shaping a program of study workshop and moving in then to the Wecm workshop aspects. And then those others, maybe we might need facilitators who do not necessarily need to be a part of the program of study, but still need to be a part of understanding how we run a regular, if you will, for lack of a better term, a regular Wecm workshop.
While I think we all agree that there needs to be two different levels there of training for those facilitators.
Yep.
I still think it's important in thinking back on what Dina's saying about the succession planning for administrators, that there really is a need not only for a one-on-one, but a two-on-one, because many of these administrators, they may be coming from a CE reference. They may be coming from a credit reference only. And they don't want to be in facilitation, yet they need advanced information. So I think that that's important, that maybe it's four different strands there.
Yeah. Good, Cindy. Thank you.
Well, and as we look at this next summer workshop, now that we've discovered that we have two types of facilitators, except for the two of you who did the real estate one, all of these are just good old-fashioned Wecm facilitators.
You got it.
And is 2 hours of an orientation going to turn them into a program of study facilitator the day before they have to do it?
Good point.
Or the 2 hours before they do it? It was actually his point. I'm stealing his point, but because I've heard him think, he's like, I don't know if this is how it can do
No, we'll
this.
have to, you're absolutely right. I think what's emerging is we're going to have both on-site orientation, but real facilitator training.
EOS facilitator
next
training.
spring for the folks. And I'm not sure.
We can do that maybe together just somehow.
We can. It depends on the schedule probably. But I'm not sure we want to do, we'll have to think this through, expanded facilitator training until we get through that summer workshop. In other words, we might want to do a planning training session for the folks who are going to facilitate.
The actual individuals who have volunteered for and signed up for this
We're still
mission.
in a beta mode, really.
Yes.
We really are in a beta mode, so we don't want to take that out. But I do think we want to, and how we pay attention and when do we pay attention to this next level of Wecm training is really important, because as we're learning about programs of study, we want to include that in that training. And then how do we deliver it to the leaders who are emerging on all our professional associations? But there's a lot to be done there, I think.
And Dina, that's where I'm coming from. I'm coming from the board, the TACE board, who recognizes that we need this development because we couldn't serve the role that is expected to review the work, to do the workshop this past year. That is where I'm totally coming from. And outside of being very passionate about developing leaders and passionate that TACE is doing what each one of your institutions thinks we're doing, which is educating on a higher level of Wecm, not just doing one. So we've already talked about that as a board.
And that's the role, really, as I see it, of our professional statewide organizations is to serve in that function, is to provide those professional development opportunities.
Do you, I know TACTI used to use like the third Thursday, Friday in June for its new first board kickoff meeting. Still do. And Kristen, I don't recall when TACE does the summer also for the new board, right? June. I want to toss this out. You might want to think about an in-depth orientation to Wecm and GIPWE as part of a new board thing. I know those are really jam-full meetings, so it might not work at all. But it might be a good time for some real in-depth, because you could really do Q&A and things like that. Or maybe
as part of the new board orientation,
So, but I really appreciate the punch to us to get up on that. So I do think integrating that as new leadership training is really good.
All right.
I do want to say one thing. I'm sorry. I want to say one thing. Since the steering committee really worked with the POS, and that was a separate group, and we really have kept you sort of segregated, I just wanted to tell you all that we really did do facilitator training with the beta test, in that the entire steering committee joined the facilitators, and they sat in the back of the room and observed the entire process. And believe me, they really did. They sat through the entire thing. And then we debriefed and we talked about what we did that was good and what we wanted to improve upon. So, frankly, at this point, I think with the review and us continuing to work, we will be ready to facilitate the POS workshops. This
coming summer.
This coming summer. But we must move on to train others so that you be prepared the next year.
Right.
And so we'll be talking about a strategy for doing that, because it's got to be done this year.
Right. Okay. That was where I was headed. I just wanted to make sure that we had some sense of closure about how we are going to address the issues that have been brought before in this conversation. So what Faye is addressing is that for the 2015 workshops that we have facilitators who have gone through an orientation already on program of study, and certainly that there'll be a need for some refresher there, but I think we still need to work on how we can respond to at least starting to develop this 201 that we're talking about. And that actually plays into, again, what our discussion was yesterday with Dr. Tomerlin and with Mindy about after we get this first PowerPoint slide taken care of for the intro to Wecm, this 201 is the next thing that we need to be involved in helping develop. Okay, very good. All righty.
Don?
Yes, ma'am.
Back to our list.
Yes.
I have a request, okay? Number one, if you know that there are individuals on this list that do not have an X by their name, that you know that they're no longer available, please let me know so I can get them off the list, because it's kind of embarrassing for me to think that I'm not using people. Simply, I did call a number of people that were not available. I didn't bring those notations to you. And then the second thing is, do I need to hold a facilitator in training workshop sometime during this year, whether it be at TACTI or, as you all indicated, maybe in the summer? And if so, I'm very concerned about the same thing Dina's concerned about. I was concerned about that last year. And that is, we train people and then we never ask them to work. And of course, part of that is a little bit of the transition between moving the project from one college to the other. I really didn't know what kind of dialogue had been held with these people. So I went down the list and I called other people to get me a little help in selecting people. But there are people here that I did not call. They did not participate. And they probably finished their training maybe even 2 years ago. And that is not good, okay?
Right. I agree. I'm going to respond, and anybody else that wants to. My impression of a way to answer your question, Faye, is this. Because of those same reasons, I don't think that a fit training would be good this spring.
Okay.
Because we already know what we're going to do for next summer. But waiting a whole nother year until spring would be too late. So here's my recommendation. We have a conference once a year that is comprised of TACE, TACTI, TCCIA. That's all of your instructional leaders for the state of Texas. We can start planning now to talk with whoever is going to be the TCCIL Conference Planning Committee for fall of 2015 and ask that there be the consideration of a pre-conference fit training workshop to go in conjunction with the TCCIL Fall Conference. I think that way we play off of the fact that we have all three of those professional associations meeting at once. And to go through the training then in the fall, we know who will wind up being a potential source of folks to work then that following May, June period. And we can have more stuff going out to them for the remainder of that time.
So to clarify, you're talking about TCCIL fall of 2015.
That's correct.
I just want to make sure I got it in the
Yeah.
notes. Okay.
And so it would be a pre-conference fit training workshop.
And you see this as an open session to anyone who is interested in participating.
Right.
And then at the end, they could sort of declare whether they want to continue and serve or not.
Right.
That way we'd do the training without placing a burden on anyone.
Right.
Okay? Is that all right?
Okay. All right, then we put the...
I'd have one. So does that mean that we would still, though, have an additional POS facilitator training for the summer sessions?
Now that fit...
Other than the 2 hours.
Yeah, that fit training that I'm talking about at TCCIL will cover the gamut of what we are now doing in workshops, starting with POS and regular Wecm. So it would be a fit training for anybody that would need to be a facilitator, regardless of whether they're going to play just in the world of the Wecm review or both POS and Wecm.
Well, what I think Dwayne is asking for
the
is
summer of
a
15.
training more than the 2-hour orientation for the May 19th through 21st.
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes.
So there would still be an additional training beyond.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I noticed, I was looking at the number of people on our list here who are TACE, and who are non-TACE, if you will, CE and credit. And one of the things that we talked about yesterday was what Dina just said, probably that need for two facilitators. Why not pair them up?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that would be,
Yeah.
okay.
Yep.
We had a little sidebar on facilitator training. Do we use nomination process or an invitation? And I'm sorry, I don't remember.
Invitation.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of an open-ended invitation just to see if you might be interested in becoming a facilitator. Once you learn more, then you kind of get a sense of whether this is something you want to be involved with or not. Okay, next on the agenda is TACE conference presentation. And then after that, the TACTI conference presentation. So let's just kind of take those one by one. TACTI actually will occur on the calendar first. So let's talk about TACTI first. I have here in parentheses Catherine and Robin. Is that correct or what?
Yes, Catherine and Robin will be doing the presentation at TACTI.
At TACTI.
Mm-hmm.
And that's in April?
My big question is...
Okay.
That's right, in April. My big question is, do you all feel that we should have a presentation on Wecm and one on POS, or is the combined presentation maybe at this point the best? And Jeff, would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, I think we need to be looking at it from the perspective of combining the two together due to the fact that we are moving in that direction and continuing to move in that direction. I think keeping them as completely separate, it's counterproductive, and then also people don't get the full presentation and understanding of what they are about. So,
I think it also could appear duplicitous.
Yeah.
Well, at TACRO, it seemed to work quite well combining the program of study and the Wecm course review process. I think y'all tied it together very well on the PowerPoint presentation, and I think it made very clear, understandable sense to the individuals. I think they realized it's coming, and we've been doing Wecm course reviews for so long. It's easy to tie in the program of study with it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that will be then Catherine and Robin
doing a presentation on
program of study, workshop, Wecm workshop.
And I will submit the program to the program chair. Our session, whatever you want to call it. Right.
Okay. Now, let's move to TACE. Okay. So who will be interested in being the presenters at the TACE conference? And again, Kristen, the dates for that conference? April 21st, 22nd, 23rd, Omni South Park here in Austin. So who from the leadership committee would be willing? First of all, here's a caveat, folks. The coordinating board has said that since these organizations are a part of the leadership committee, then we should not be paying the cost of registration and hotel and all that for someone separately to go and do these presentations to those organizations. So it really needs to be somebody off the leadership committee who is also a member of the organization to do these presentations. Okay, so we've got Kirk White and Kristen Walker.
Now then, my next question, because I will be submitting the application for you to present, do you want it to be a POS and Wecm, or would you prefer that it not be?
It should be the same that we do at TACTI and we do at TACE.
I certainly will provide the presentation that Jeff and I did in the fall for you. And remember, that's your presentation, not mine. And if you see that there's a need to make changes, please do so, because you know your organization better than I do. Okay?
But just kind of like the GIPWE, where it says in course titles that you can add to but you can't take away from. Okay, next on the agenda is looking at leadership meetings for the remainder of this year. As a reminder, you should already have, each of you should already have blocked out on your calendars for February the 4th as our next leadership meeting. Again, that'll be here, just like this today is, from 9 a.m. until approximately 3 p.m. The task group will meet the previous day on February the 3rd from 10 until 5. And just as a heads up to you, just so that y'all know, the Program of Study Steering Committee yesterday felt the need to hold a Program of Study Advisory Committee meeting. And given the fact that a number of folks who are on the Program of Study Steering Committee are also a part of this group as well, the recommendation was made to the project staff that this Program of Study Advisory Committee be held here in Austin at the coordinating board on February the 5th. Partly because some people who have come in won't have to go home and then come back here and that kind of thing, but also just felt that it was important that that meeting be held here in Austin and at the coordinating board. That's just a heads up to the rest of the leadership committee that will be taking place on the 5th of February. Our protocol really says currently that we are supposed to meet once a quarter. But we learned last year that if you're actually dividing the calendar into equal 3-month quarters, that we normally meet in August, which is like the end of the 4th quarter. We are meeting usually at the end of October or the 1st of November, so you kind of are in the 1st quarter. And then February is our 2nd quarter. What has been problematic, folks, that we ran into for the last couple of years is this. It's that 3rd quarter, if you will, of the March, April, May period, because that's the exact period of time that you have all these professional association meetings. The staff is up to their necks, if not higher or lower, depending on how you want to phrase it, in all the preparations for the workshops. And they certainly don't have time to then turn around and get all the materials ready for in the planning and setting things up for leadership and task group meeting in the midst of all of that. So we actually find ourselves kind of caught in this dilemma, if you will, of our protocol saying we should meet quarterly, but the fact of the matter is, reality is the workload will not permit us to meet as a group in March, April, and May. So I'm going to suggest that the leadership committee consider the potential modification of our protocol, and we can discuss that just as a discussion, and then maybe in February we can actually look at a potential change in the protocol to vote on if you believe that that's appropriate.
Don, a quick comment, and I know we've had WebEx meetings. Many of you participated last year. I'm not saying that should replace the face-to-face meeting, but I know we recorded some of those WebEx meetings. I did anyways when we called everybody. Those of you that could participate at times, Faye has some pressing issues at the last minute. So I like to recommend, if we do change the protocol, to put some language in there that reflects that sometimes we do have those online meetings. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good point, Raphael. I think, though, those WebEx meetings were primarily for the task group, weren't they? Not the whole leadership?
Yeah, I think
we had
got
one for the whole leadership.
With the whole leadership. We needed a vote on something, and I can't remember.
That's right.
Can't remember exactly what it was.
I agree.
But even if it's just a small task group, I think we should put it in the language.
Yeah.
When we discuss it in February, let's not forget that option.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It saves a lot of time and
it does.
Effort.
Sure does. Any other discussion about our meeting sequence? Okay. Given this discussion, then, Catherine, if you would, take a look at the protocol, and if you would, prepare a draft for our February 4th meeting.
It's comprised of 2 sentences, just to let you know where we are. It is protocol number 4-01-02, and it says the WLC meets quarterly. WLC meetings and task force meetings are called or canceled by the WLC chair on an as-needed basis.
Okay.
So, actually, that wording right there,
that's permissive language right there.
That allows for it.
Yep.
That cancellation of that meeting.
Right.
It's we may want to leave it as is. I will let the membership know that there are going to be quite a few changes forthcoming on the protocols. I started working on them prior to this meeting, and a lot of it has to do with modified changes in the draft of GIPWE that's out there. There were changes in documentation. I mean, not that, the charts, the tables.
Yes.
Right. And so expect that our February meeting will have protocol changes for the entire group.
Okay. Thank you. Let's move then to, before we do closing remarks, what I'd like to do is offer a time, and I want in the future, Faye and I talked about this I want to make sure that the leadership committee feels ownership of this meeting. That's why I asked Faye to make sure that the agenda got out at least a week in advance, that you had an opportunity to add or modify the agenda items, because this is your meeting. I'm facilitating as a chair, but this is your meeting. It's not just my meeting. And so any items that you feel that are important for consideration, you should have the opportunity to know that the agenda is being put together and that you have an opportunity to influence that agenda. Number 2 is just giving you an opportunity to speak on any topic or subject that you feel is germane to the responsibility of this committee. And so I'd like to open the floor for anything that you, serving in this role, believe needs to be discussed by this body.
I do have one comment, Don.
Okay.
I guess a statement. Whenever we start looking at going back to programs of study, I hate to keep pulling it back to that.
That's all right.
But I've sat through, Jeff and Faye's presentations on program of study. I've been here. I've listened to the discussions from kind of an outside view, the 50,000-foot view, as Jeff likes to call it sometimes during the presentations. And to be completely honest with you, and I may be the only one here, that still has some confusion whenever you mention things like we're going to do programs of study. Directly after that, we're going to go through the Wecm courses, and we're going to have this group of courses that are not part of the programs of study. And again, maybe it's because I'm looking at this in the wrong way, but is programs of study not going to direct the courses that should be there? And I realize that CE is a different animal, and I'm not looking at that, but I'm looking at the credit side of things. If I have a industry group that says these are the areas that need to be taught,
right?
Then I guess.
Right.
Here's the question: is why do I have these other areas?
I think you've brought up a valid point, Dwayne, and it's not something that we have totally worked out and resolved yet. My own personal sense is that, and this has been part of the program of study steering committees wrestling with this idea too. And so everybody needs to understand this is a work in process and progress. So not every answer has been figured out yet. I would say to you as a way to respond that what we are putting together at this point, it appears, are those statewide programs of study. Okay? As you heard, what the filters are is the number of programs of like in terms of the program learning outcomes, and how many there are of those that have the same kind of learning outcomes across the state, and how many total graduates are we currently putting out under our existing program labels that could become a part of this state program curriculum. Once you build that curriculum that becomes the statewide curriculum, there may be still some courses on the credit side as well as the CE side that are kind of unique to a geographic demand of a particular industry type, a local need, or in some cases a very regionalized, something that exists only kind of in East Texas or the Panhandle or the Gulf Coast. Like, for example, the one that was tossed out yesterday in our discussion was maritime. Not all of us around the state can have that program. Certainly Midland College could not have it. Amarillo could not have it. So.
But if you have a maritime program set up by a maritime industry, then they should set up these courses.
Right.
It wouldn't be random maritime courses.
That's correct. That is correct. So what?
That's where my confusion comes.
Right. So it can
be regional.
Yeah.
And
right. Where we're headed, Dwayne, is this: we're trying to eat this elephant one bite at a time, and the bigger the side of that elephant is, there's where we're taking our first bites. So we're looking at the ones that have the largest statewide as the first go round of these, because we can't bite off the large and the local regionals at the same time. So we're going to deal with the large ones one. When I say large, I'm not talking large institutions. No, those programs that exist on the greatest number, I'll put it that way, the greatest number of colleges across the state deserve that first go-round of creation of these statewide programs of study curricula. Those that are the local regional somehow need to get recognized officially in that capacity. And that's where we're going to have to work with the coordinating board on guidelines, procedures of how that could occur. But what we don't want is a maverick, if you will, loner out there claiming that they have a state program of study when in fact it's only being operated by 1 or 2 or 3 colleges. If it's only at 2 or 3 colleges, then let those 2 or 3 colleges have a process to say, we are seeking state recognition, and that because it's a maritime program, it's only going to be at 2 or 3 institutions or 4 or whatever, but it's not going to be a statewide. It's not going to be every college has the opportunity for that program. But a maritime program deserves to get recognized as an official program of study. Where it can be located is going to be limited by the content. Now that's different than institutions that are going to want to kind of keep doing what they're doing just because they want to keep doing what they do. If their courses become, if they have a program that becomes a statewide program, then in essence, the coordinating board is going to have to deal with coming up with a procedure that says this program is not a part of the state recognized program, then the courses that you have that are different than the program of study no longer get recognized somehow. So the Wecm Leadership Committee eventually may have to look at how we're going to archive courses that aren't a part of some type of officially recognized program of study.
Right, and I think that's kind of the direction I was going with that question.
I understand.
Once we get to facilitating each of those courses at the end, how are we, that's going to be one of those things I think we're going to have to address, how we're going to attack those extra courses to keep people from doing that very thing.
Right, I understand.
I have a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, as I told you all earlier, I studied 5 states, and I really did spend 2 full weeks plus reviewing, studying, seeing similarities, going back and checking. And every state allows some flexibility. Some states control that flexibility, but there's some flexibility. When I discovered this, all of a sudden, Dwayne, I didn't feel like you're feeling today, because that's exactly the way I was feeling. I'm leading this project, and I have so many questions. So that was very, very helpful to me. And I'd be glad to send you the materials that I provided for the steering committee that sort of addressed what these, states were doing. It's not a very good presentation without, we talked through it. Okay, so that's the other issue is not every college will adopt that state program of study immediately. Okay. We don't have guidelines for that. We don't know. But we don't want the courses to become obsolete because they were not reviewed. So all the courses will be reviewed, but even those that are not a part of the program of study will need to be reviewed until we have guidelines in terms of how we're going to drop them, how we're going to get rid of these courses. But I do see somewhere along the line that they're going to go away. But we don't want to destroy our system by not addressing them this year and maybe next year.
And we also do have a protocol in place that will take care of some of this, depending on how this ends up. We review non-used courses, get archived. And I think this will be an evolutionary thing. You've got the programs of studies, you've got the flexibility within some colleges that may use some of these courses. No, the ones that don't get used at all are going to naturally attrition out. We may not have to set up something new to say archive these, because eventually they will be. But there's so many questions about who's going to use the program of study. Is it going to be required? Is it not going to be required? And all of that kind of stuff is yet to be determined, and often by people way above what we do here in this committee. And so I think Faye's correct. We keep reviewing what's in the Wecm now, and then as the program of study movement evolves, our archiving process will kick in and start dropping things off the inventory.
Right. Yeah, and there's the whole piece that has to do with the role of electives in a program of study.
Right.
Which kind of opens a big door. And then the role of single course offerings and some things like that, so that I think we want to be pretty cautious and continue to review until we know more.
Right.
I know Gary just walked in and Jeff is here. We know the issue of getting industry to come to the table, and they started the programs of study back with the energy cluster. And, across the state, we know we have a problem, a lot of the community colleges, with validation from industry. What a way to offer all the colleges something that's validated by industry because of this advisory committee that we have, and obviously we have wide representation. So Dwayne, when I hear what you're saying, yes, this is what industry recommends. It's more than just what they recommend. It's having a valid document that's being recorded and offering it to the colleges. Those colleges that don't want to adopt the program of study, I like to see what they're using for validation. I really would like to see that, because there's been a lot of work that's gone into this and continues to be looked at. It's not just static, and here it is. This is the set of courses that you should be using. Obviously, this committee, I don't think is going to go away. Correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but I think it's going to be around for a while.
I agree. And again, this is a learning process for all of us, including the coordinating board itself. But I do see that, Raphael, just as you made the point, I think it's important for us to all understand that when we have a business and industry from across the state saying to us, here are the specific program level learning outcomes, here are the types of courses and knowledge and skills which we expect that you provide through your curriculum for equipping people that we can hire. And when you have that kind of curriculum, then it would be rather foolish of an individual institution to just turn your nose and say, don't bother me with the facts, I'm going to do what I want to do. They're kind of cutting off their nose to spite their face then. Now, again, if there is a specific regional or local unique need that is not represented on the state level or national level, then again, I use maritime as that example, but certainly I think we have to have processes in place to recognize those types of programs as being just as legitimate as the other that all community colleges and TSTC and Lamar can offer across the state. I mean, there's legitimacy regardless of size. It's what is expected and important and required by business and industry. So that, again, that reinforces the importance of business and industry as being the foundation cornerstone for how we're trying to approach programs of study. Yeah, Joe?
And I think, in dealing with the kind of the uncertainty of, what's going to happen with this course and what's going to happen with that course, like over the years, we've kind of developed a plan for getting educators out of their own institution's process by using the analogy of take off your institution hat and put on the state hat for the Wecm workshops, then going into the programs of study, especially like with the one that was done this past summer, telling them, okay, now take off your educator hat and put on your I guess, the industry hat, looking at it from the point of view of you have these entry points into the workforce so that they can not get caught on, well, it's not our job to teach soft skills, or, it's not our job to do this or to do that. We're being told that there's this gap. And so that's been an effective way to, I guess, get them to be open to the new ideas. Maybe that can continue.
Right. Good point, Joe. Thank you. Okay, that was great, Dwayne. Thank you for bringing that forward. You're probably expressing some things that others have had but not wanting to bring forward. Do we have any others like that? That anybody that wants to put something on the table? Well, while y'all are thinking, I'm going to put something on the table, and I gave Dwayne a heads up on this, so I wanted to make sure that he understood where I'm coming from on this. Prior to the 83rd legislative session, when community colleges in particular went to a different funding structure, we used to have a mechanism that was very useful, and it was a part of information tools that Dwayne, on behalf of the coordinating board, working with other staff people at the coordinating board, made available to us at the website for Wecm information, and it was called the SIP Rubric Index, which carried, in addition, the funding code of that SIP rubric, as well as the actual dollar amount of the legislative approved reimbursement rate. Now, what happened was that little index or matrix got blown up when we went to a different funding structure, okay? Because no longer is it a straightforward figure anymore, because we are actually having two funding drivers now. 90% of our dollars is from contact hour funding, 10% from the 5 success points. So, in essence, that what's still out there and accessible through the Wecm information is still the old 2013-14 biennium funding rates. So that's, nobody should be using that, because that is no reality to that anymore. Okay? But the question is, where can you go? How can you get this information? Now, what has been available for many, many years out of the ACGM, the Academic Course Guide Manual, in their appendices is an index that shows the ACGM rubric and the funding code, okay, so that at least you know you have a mechanism to go then track your funding. And so I'm bringing this up to basically put a request out to the coordinating board to see if we could get at least partly back what we used to have. I know you can't provide the actual dollar amount anymore, but it would be most helpful if we could have the mechanism to know where, to help people know where to go to find that amount. So if we could have the SIP code, rubric, funding code index, then institutions and individuals can then go and look in the financial side at the coordinating board, where there's the spreadsheet that shows the 90% and then the 10% divided by the 5 success points. But it's the 90% that we're still talking about here, folks. That's where we are still, we don't have any, generally people don't know where to go find that 90% anymore. And so that's what I'm asking for, is a tool that provides that good listing of all the SIP code numbers and the rubrics tied to the funding code. So I'm just putting that out as a request. I think it would be very beneficial to the CTE people, both credit and continuing ed, to have that index, because actually the ACGM provides that to the academic people.
Let me say that at San Jacinto College, we've developed a pretty darn good program review system, and we've even established a figure that we call the cost-benefit index, trying to make sure that all programs are financially viable. That document that you're referring to is exactly what we needed to use as part of the calculations.
Yep. Is anybody else kind of in the dark about how to go get that kind of information anymore?
Yeah, we also are lacking that for program review. That's a key piece for program review, and we relied on it heavily in the past when we could track that kind of information. We can't now. Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then I see Dr. Tomerlin here. Can we at least ask y'all to consider providing that as a source of information?
Yeah, I actually was having some conversation with Gary Johnstone about this topic, not the list specifically about funding codes and that kind of stuff, just a couple of days ago. So obviously we have it internally. I will try to figure out where it is and if we can share it. Dwayne, I guess you had conversations at some point about redeveloping your spreadsheet that you've done in the past. Have you headed down that road or had that conversation as I'm doing this publicly, putting you on the spot?
Right. Yeah. Like I say, each time I get an email or request like this, it kind of floats it a little higher up the.
Yeah.
It is on my to-do list, and it is something I'm looking into. Probably having available. Not sure how much I can promise, but hopefully within the next month.
Great. Great. That would be most beneficial. It really would.
I will.
Dwayne.
I have reached out to Susan Brown on another subject a couple of times today, and I think we're going to have a little informal chat at some point today, and I'll visit with her about this as well, if I visit with her today. But
okay.
But we will see what we can do.
Like I say, at least, in the ACGM, they have their version of what I'm talking about, and so it would be beneficial for the CTE people to have something similar. Thank you. Is there any other business that needs to come before the committee before we adjourn? Well, if not, I thank each and every one of you for making the special effort during the difficult weather conditions for being here. And I wish you a safe journey home. Please be careful. Thank you very much, and we'll see you February the 4th.